Staff to introduce the amendments to the Cache County Fire Code.
We're actually looking for John Luffy, the county deputy county attorney. This was his item that I saw him walking up the stairs just a moment ago. I don't see him in the room right now.
Should we just move it to the end?
Perhaps, yeah.
Do we need to have a motion for that, or are we okay?
I think you're okay. Wouldn't hurt to make a motion.
Make a motion? Is there someone willing to make a motion that we move that item 2 to the end?
So
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any further discussion? Or any opposed? Okay. Turn the time over to staff to introduce item 3, Rocky Mountain Power Transmission Line to rebuild, conditional use permit.
Yeah, so since the mask makes it a little hard, I'll just be brief on this. But this is a conditional use permit request from Rocky Mountain Power to remove and replace existing transmission lines, new lines, or new poles, from the Nipley substation to Hiram. This use is categorized under use type 5610, a utility facility distribution for an electric transmission line. And the CUP is required for transmission lines designed to provide electric transmission at voltages of less than 140,000 volts, but more than 30,000. So again, this is just going across an existing easement. They provided 5 easements from the early 1900s. Since they are a little difficult to read and understand, we have provided, or asked as a condition of approval that they just confirm all the private properties.
I'm sorry, Angie. John's here, and that is a public hearing. It might be wise to reconsider the commission's motion and allow that public hearing to move forward. That's for the fire amendments to Cache County Fire Code. Give me 2 seconds. I apologize. Wherever you're okay.
I'm sorry, I wasn't here.
My apologies, Angie and the commission. If that's amenable to you, it would probably be wise to hold that public hearing as has been noticed.
Okay. Commissioners, are we okay with that? Do we need to make another motion?
Probably should motion that. So moved.
You're
To move that
back into the schedule? Okay, is there a second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So we're gonna go back to item 2 on the agenda. Have a public hearing for the amendments to the Cache County Fire Code.
I don't have comments here, staff. I know Mr. Luthi has been working with our road department and the fire district, I believe, on some of the details attached to this recommendation.
Commissioners, I'm sorry I came in late tonight, came from another hearing. I didn't dress up just for you. The impetus of this proposed ordinance is primarily to be able to adopt Appendix D of the International Fire Code as part of the Cache County Fire Code. State code adopts for all of us the International Fire Code, but excludes the appendices, which could then be adopted by counties and municipalities if they'd like. Appendix D specifically says that if you've got a development where you have more than 30 dwelling units, you need 2 fire access roads. And the concern of the road department and development services is, and our fire folks, is that if you've got too many homes all serviced by one road and you have an incident where that road becomes inaccessible, then you've got a bunch of folks in there that can't receive the emergency services. We've had some applicants well, they aren't applicants yet, but they've been coming in and asking questions regarding developing and going in and adding homes that would put that area of the valley above 30 units, and we've indicated that for fire reasons, we'd want to have that additional road. They've said, well, you don't have that in your code. And we've said, well, just for basic safety reasons, we'd ask for that. But we believe that it would be better if we can point specifically to that provision of the appendix and say we're enforcing that in Cache County. So that's why we drafted the ordinance. As we were looking at our ordinances of where to add, adding that in, recognize that our references to state code are outdated. We're referencing sections of state code that are no longer there. So just updating our references to state code, to the fire code, and then adding Appendix D as part of most of Appendix D, and you can see in the ordinance the provisions there. That's the reason and what it does.
Can I ask a clarification question on that? When we talk 30 units there, is that on a parcel, or how is that defined? Is it a given?
Yeah, developments of
geographical
one
area?
or two family dwellings where the number of dwelling units exceeds 30 shall be provided with two separate and approved fire apparatus access roads. So a single family home or a duplex, but if it's a duplex, that's going to count as 2 units. If you have 30 of those dwelling units, you need, if you have more than 30,
My
you need
question
a
is,
secondary
though,
home.
dwelling
road.
units on a single parcel?
No,
Is it so it's a region? What's the geographic area that we're talking about when we say 30 units?
yeah, developments, the
So it is
appendix talks about a development.
A development by a single developer?
That's a good question.
I didn't quite understand whether, if we just throw this out on
Right.
if we say it's in a square mile, it's a single parcel, it's by a single developer. I didn't know I didn't really know what the scope of this was. How do we get to the 30 units?
The International Fire Code talks in terms of a development. This section requires that 1 and 2 family dwelling subdivisions with more than 30 dwellings have more than one fire apparatus access road into the development.
It uses the term subdivision, so
That was talking about dwelling subdivisions. So if you've got more than one dwelling unit, in that sense, subdivision is the same as unit. It's talking about developments. I don't believe that the appendix is clear as to whether that is by a single developer or if it's a development of homes. And I think that's left somewhat open to interpretation, but our Development Services Office and my recommendation would be that that be interpreted to mean when you have, it does not need to be a single developer, or else it defeats the purpose of the provision. You could have 5 developers with 10 homes each, and now you've got 50 homes and only one road. I don't think that's the intent, and I don't think a court would see that. I think that a common sense idea of if you've got a development, if you've got a segment of homes served by only one road, that's okay till you hit 30, and then you've got to find another road to.
and who pays for that? The next development that adds the ones to make the 30 homes?
I believe so. I think that's.
I mean, it's back to the same discussion we had on changing the road standard and
Yeah.
and where that cost ends up. Okay.
Thanks.
So commissioners, thank you, Mr. Luthi. Any other questions for him or?
That's a good question, Jason. I had assumed it was on like a dead-end road, for example.
Yeah.
A segment of road that goes, only a certain distance.
But I didn't get that out of
Right.
what we were given, and so it's I try to think what's the worst case scenario that can happen here?
Right.
And is it something that is enforceable? So I've got a development on one side of the road with 15 houses, and then a developer comes on the other side of the road and wants to put 15 in, or they're done 5 at a time. Where does that come into? I agree with the spirit of, yeah, we want to be in compliance with standards and with state code and all of those things, but I think some clarity there may be beneficial to us.
Mr. Watterson, I could provide this clarity, that anytime a developer is asked to put in a road or other infrastructure, if what they're being asked to put in at their own cost is disproportionate to the burden they're putting on the community, then we can't ask for beyond the burden that they're putting on the community. So the default would be that, yes, if you're the one that's getting us over 30 homes, the code says you've got to provide that secondary road, but they could come back and say, but that's really more than the burden, that's going to cost us more than the burden that we're putting on the county, and so you can't enforce that against us, and we'd have to do that analysis. So the law does account for that we can't put a burden on a single developer beyond the burden that they're putting on the public.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And, you know, I totally, go along with that. I can just see, I've got five parcels, and we add one more house, and it gets us to 30. Well, these other 5 parcels may say, I don't want to provide a road. Right. And anyway, I can see some potential challenges in this. I like the spirit of what we're trying to do, but the challenges, I think, maybe down the road in our code should reflect something around that. So that's my comment.
Commissioners, if without further comment or question then, are we ready to open the public hearing?
Yep.
Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we open public hearing for this.
Second motion?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, who do we have here tonight that come for the amendment to the Cache County Fire Code? If there is anybody and you want to speak on it, we'd okay. If we'd welcome you to come up here and voice any concerns or questions. Seeing that there is none, nobody's here for that, okay?
I dressed up for nothing.
Go ahead.
Said I dressed up for nothing.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the public hearing.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioners, what do we want to do?
I've said plenty. I do have concerns, and I think a motion that we send to the council on this one, how would be best to reflect
I would
those
think just
concerns?
notate it as a concern with no lack of identification of an area size. And then what happens to the 5th, 6th, 30th home that comes in if it's a different developer? How does that impact play on him or the first developer?
I think you can just state it as a concern.
Okay.
And so when we take that to the council, that can be reflected in that recommendation.
Okay.
What's your thoughts, Phil?
There's always going to be something that's going to be fixed later down the road, so I would just make the motion that we send it on to the county council.
Did one of you notate then our 2 concerns, or the concerns of the lack of identification of the area, and then
What's the trigger for the 30 units?
Exactly.
and then how does it apply if there's multiple developers in a fixed area?
Yeah, just a few examples talking through a couple of examples may be helpful,
Yeah.
just to understand it.
So you want examples of parcels or numbers of homes or?
How does that 30 units apply?
Okay.
A scenario, I mean, is that
Yeah.
what you think, Jason? So-
Yeah.
Is that defined as a single-family home, though?
As I read the comments to the appendix, it does provide some additional detail on that. Happy to read that to you. Once the maximum number of dwelling units allowed by this section has been reached, no further development may occur unless the fire code official determines that there will be a future road connection that will prevent creation of an excessive dead-end situation with no means for apparatus turnaround. Such determination by the fire code official should consider the phased development of an individual project or adjacent projects. Requiring evidence of legal agreements for specific future development would be prudent, especially in times of economic uncertainty. This gives the fire code official an opportunity to assess whether additional access is required in the interim. And those legal agreements then could be between the county and the developer, between adjacent developers who could be homeowner, single homeowner developer, or a larger developer. So, again, if it's that particular developer who is creating the need or the bulk of the need, then as a county, we would ask them to bear the cost of putting in the road. If they're only creating a portion of the need, then we would ask them to pay for a portion of the second road, and it would need to be on a case-by-case basis. I don't believe that you're going to be able to go and craft ordinance language that's going to get you answering every specific question.
I
So
totally
I think
agree with
if
that.
we find that language in the appendix, I think that covers your concern.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
would
guess,
recommend a favorable recommendation.
I guess the example I could think of, so we're kind of talking dead ends. Let's take the landfill road out in Clarkston. It goes in dead ends out there. If we start developing along there, but we put one house per parcel, and by the time we get to the landfill, we have 30 homes, does that constitute the need?
If there were a developer that came in and wanted to put in now beyond the 30 homes, somebody's going to have to figure out what's your secondary access and who's imposing that burden, that need on the public for that road, and whoever's imposing that need would need to bear it.
Okay. Are we okay then with that discussion? Phil, did you already make the motion?
Motion.
I'll second it.
Second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So that suggestion goes to our suggestion goes to the county council of passing that or approval of that. Turn the time back over to Angie to take off where she left off on the item number 3, the Rocky Mountain Power Transmission Line Rebuild Conditional Use Permit.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe I was talking about easement. So just because this covers quite a number of private properties, we have asked that they provide additional information to confirm that all private properties are covered by the easements they provided, and if there is a gap, that they must provide copies of all the newly recorded easements. So the project, as described in the applicant's letter of intent, is needed due to increased residential and commercial development in the city of Hiram. Demand for electrical power has steadily increased, and the city anticipates the demand will continue to grow. In fact, they state by late summer of 2021, demand for electrical power being sent to Hiram could exceed the current capacity of the existing lines and services. So the proposed project will upgrade and increase capacity of the existing system and allow the applicant to continue providing reliable power to customers. So this project will increase the conductor size, which requires the pole replacement to accommodate the weight of the new conductor. They state that the footprint of the new the new poles will be similar to the existing one, but they will be 5 to 10 feet taller. They did not include a tentative construction schedule or any staging or parking areas for construction, so we have asked as conditions of approval that both of those items be submitted prior to recording their conditional use permit. Sorry, my packet was So proposed CUPs can only be approved if they're not detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity, or injuries to property or improvements in the vicinity. The primary activities, again, as identified in the letter of intent, will only occur on the subject parcels and will not pose unreasonable risk to the safety of persons or property, and does not unlawfully or unreasonably interfere with the lawful use of the facility. We did identify some known or reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the use. Oftentimes, these construction activities are taking place in fields and such, and so the disruption of the soil can introduce invasive species. And so, as a condition of approval, we were required that they work with the county weed control department on a noxious weed control plan, so that disturbed areas are replanted with native plants. The sensitive areas, a part of the proposed parcels may include sensitive areas as well, so they will need to submit additional review and documentation if those areas are impacted. One item that was brought to our attention after noticing is the location of some of the project area is adjacent to or near USU's Wildlife Research Center and the Millville Face Wildlife Management Area. So we did add condition 10 to kind of address those, asking the applicant to coordinate with the Wildlife Management Area and the Wildlife Research Center to minimize any potential negative impacts to the wildlife in that area. USU did respond with an email, I believe I sent you earlier today, just asking for more specific language on condition 10, just a 7-day notice before and after work is done, that if the noise levels from the construction will be higher than the ambient, that they're notified of that so that they can take measures to mitigate the impacts to their animals. So staff has no problem with adding that additional language. Beyond that, I did receive one other public comment from a property owner concerned about the scope of the work, which I also forwarded you today. But beyond that, that does conclude staff's report. If you have any questions, let me know.
I think the wildlife, I think that face falls under that, but I think they're closed to, and I don't know how the power would fall in, but I think they're closed. I can't remember if it's April 1st or up to May 1st, but.
Yeah, in the letter of intent, the applicant talks about that they wouldn't start construction until the Millville Wildlife Area opens up.
Okay.
So that would be included also as part of their scheduled construction.
Commissioners, do we have any questions?
Did I miss, it seems like everything that we've seen come through like this has a stormwater plan requirement. Did I miss that in here, or?
Public Works did review it. I don't believe Matt's here tonight. But he did not have any comments on it. So he was concerned about the invasive species and things like that. So I believe that was covered by the condition for them to work with the weed control department, make sure native plants are restored.
Does that also require, I'm sure it probably does, but emergency pass off too in the event of a problem?
From
Access?
Access? I don't
Yeah.
think there's an access requirement.
Yeah, so it's technically an unmanned facility until, just during the construction part, some of the time,
Okay.
people will be on site.
Any further questions or concerns? Is there anybody here tonight that came because of the Rocky Mountain Power application? But those of you by show of hands, is there anybody that came with further questions and has been discussed or wanted to? Commissioners, would we be okay if they were allowed a minute to express their questions or concerns? Okay, if you guys could just make your way up here to the front of the room so that we can go one after the other. We was going to run over this before we started the next. Go ahead.
Over here.
Yeah, we was going to run over this before we started the next discussion, but for those of you that received the packet or didn't, we do ask respect and courtesy of anybody that comes and participates. We ask you to state your name, keep your comments under 3 minutes or less, and if it's redundant to what's already been said, try and just state the facts. Let's not just repeat what's already been said.
Well, good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to stand up here for a minute and appreciate staff's help. I'm Steve Lichty. I'm with Rocky Mountain Power, and I'm not the project manager, but I'm working on the permitting portion of this project. I'm just here to provide support, answer any questions that you may have or that anybody else here may have. So
Okay.
I just wanted to introduce myself and
Thank you. Maybe if you just hang around there till these guys are done, and then
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Wayman Stodart, and I'm here on behalf of Tim Nilsson, who is a property owner. They own specifically parcel 0112600008. And if the Commission wouldn't mind, I've got an aerial photograph that I think will help clarify some of the questions that I have and would like to raise for the Commission's. And then here's some extra copies they can pass around. Our questions are somewhat narrowly tailored to some issues that were raised by staff. Given that this is an electrical pole that's going to be servicing what we understand to be a large area, we have some questions about the maintenance, what easements will be in place for maintenance and things like that. Given that we don't have a copy of the easements that's been provided, we're not sure what's going to happen in terms of repair, right? So what kind of easements are available for repair with the towers being taller? Is it going to require heavier machinery? Is that going to require improved roads going in some of these areas since they're so deep in rural networks? The documents that I've given you, the aerial photograph we've shown you, this is one of the first parcels along the transmission line. The transmission center is, I think, a parcel and a half south of this, and you can kind of see the line as it comes across. It comes across that corner of the parcel, and you can see the two towers. There's a bit of a shadow that kind of shows you where those towers are located. Given that the representation made to staff was that the footprint is going to be substantially similar, but there's going to be 15 to 20 feet, 10 to 15 feet taller. It's going to be of a steel instead of a wood. It's wider in nature. We have some concerns about how wide the increase is going to be. Are those electrical lines going to be over buildings that are on the way there? If they come down because of some storms or whatever, will they land on buildings in the area? Has that been considered? What's the increase in the yield that they're anticipating going through these wires? I don't think that's been made clear as far as the report that's been provided.
take that one more time, an increase in.
What's the increase in power that'll be flowing through these? Voltage, current, those kind of things, right? Again, you have a pretty broad scope, 30,000 to I think 140,000 volts. And it's just not clear what the impact of that might be on EMF in the area, those kind of things.
I definitely don't mean to interrupt you, but based on the questions you're presenting, we don't know any of them details. I'm wondering if there's a possibility that you could schedule a time with Mr. Lichty to discuss those questions. Is there anything else that you need to bring or want to bring before us tonight
We just wanted to
we
echo
need to
those
be aware of?
concerns. We just wanted to echo the concerns of staff that without a clear indication of what the easement is, the idea of they're going through a historic easement, but they're changing the nature of the poles, the depth, concerns about the foundations. Is it going to be a concrete slab? Is it not? We're just concerned about trying to get some clarification before the commission recommends that this be passed
Either
through.
Steve or staff, can we identify, I would anticipate there's a consistent right-of-way or easement the entire way. Does that vary? And how wide is it?
I don't know the width, honestly, and I don't know if Angie, if you have that copy of the easements, but.
And that's part of our concern is the easements that we received and we were able to identify with the recorder's office are all 1966, 1912. It's not clear what the easement is for. Is it going to be for underground, above ground? It's not clear what the scope of the right-of-way is, how wide it is, if they're anticipating repair traffic, if they're not anticipating repair traffic. Is the footprint going to be on a concrete slab? Is it not? It's just because we don't have a clear pre-existing easement, we're uncertain as to how we can properly move
Just for your
forward.
information too, this is not decided tonight, per se. It's just discussion, and then it goes before the council. No, it doesn't. We are the deciding, okay. I apologize, I was thinking that didn't end here.
So this is.
And I think he's addressed, there is a condition here in the staff report, the first condition that requires some additional confirmation about those easements. before they can record the permit.
And I would just encourage the commission to be aware that depending on the nature of those, we might raise other objections, we might not have other objections, right? I'm not saying we're opposed to the plan in its entirety. We don't have enough today to come before you and voice concerns or not voice concerns.
And I can probably answer some of those questions with a few, and so I'm not.
You mind if we hear the rest of the
Oh, no.
folks and then maybe cover them all at the same?
Remember the question.
Thank you for your time.
So just to restate though, your questions were entirely around easement width and what to expect for traffic and such through the areas?
And we also were hoping to try to get some understanding of the nature of the electrical current that will be flowing through. Is it going to be low voltage for a while? Is it ramping up right away? Those kind of things. Thank you, Commissioners.
My name's Richard Merrill. I own a piece of property the easement goes across. I'm on the east side of the river. I'm an electrical engineer, and we've lived out there for 31 years. And my concern is, and I didn't hear what they're changing the voltage to in the system and increasing the capacity, but just to educate you and let you understand that as you increase the voltage, that increases the field that's transmitted from that wire. So if you increase it, it sounds like we're going from 30,000 to 100 and something thousand.
That's just the definition of the use.
Okay. So a radio wave that's transmitted is talked about in volts per meter, okay? And the intensity of that signal, depending upon frequencies and other things, will affect you personally. And so you need to understand that you're not only just giving them an ability to upgrade their system, but you're also causing the potential that I have to go put a shield on my home to protect me from the fields that they're going to increase. If you're 4Xing the voltage that you're transmitting down this line, you're actually going to increase your radiation that's putting out. And before we walk off and approve this amendment, there needs to be some reassurance to us as homeowners. I hadn't heard about this until the letter came out that they were proposing to do this. So I have a home that is adjacent to that. My sleeping quarters are within about 60 feet of where those wires run across my property. They are going to raise them, which will help the issue, sounds like. But by 4Xing the output voltage, that 4X is the field that I'm going to be exposed to for 8+ hours a night. I'm underneath that signal. So it's not just we're gaining access with things, we're actually increasing the EM that's going to be transmitted to the outside world, and I'm exposed to that directly, right? So those are my concerns. I don't have problems with them getting access to repair their poles. I think it's a great thing to keep the system current and going. But when you increase that output, you're affecting people in ways that you can't see and feel until you're in the hospital with major medical problems. So that's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Tony Nelson. I am also the homeowner who...
Can you state your name one more time?
Yes, I'm sorry. Tony Nelson. My husband is Tim Nelson. We own the property that the picture was shown there. Again, with the health concerns, I have 8 small children. That is a very big concern for us. We just want to be reassured that this is not going to cause serious, long-lasting health problems for our family. In addition, we would like to have more information known about possible property devaluation, how this could affect our home by increasing the size of the power poles on our property and the poles and the amount of electricity that will be going over our property. Those are our family's concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that had a question or? Okay.
Valid concerns. We're actually not increasing the voltage. The current voltage is 46,000 volts, and that it'll remain 46,000 volts. The purpose of the larger conductor is just to allow more flow, because currently the wire is too small to serve the amount of load and capacity that the city of Hiram needs. So the voltage will not change. The poles essentially will be, for the most part, 5 to 8 feet taller. Almost all structures will be wood. This particular piece of property in Mrs. Nelson, I don't know if Harold's been working with you guys a little bit about the potential of putting in a still pole there.
We talked very briefly in the beginning.
Okay, so that's something we can continue to follow up on. But all the rest of the structure will be wood. They will be 5 to 8 feet taller, just to bear the weight of the bigger conductor, longer insulators. Chris, was there more?
Access?
Access.
Construction, effects to the property owners during construction?
So, I mean, we'll agree to any of the conditions that are on the staff report as far as notifying, residents, you know, and gaining access to those sites, working with the customers. So, we have no issues at all with those conditions.
Typically, though, you don't have to disturb a whole bunch of ground or anything like that. You're gonna be able to access at grade. You're not gonna disturb the ground.
Right.
Anything like that. You're just replacing the poles.
And the taller poles will not require larger equipment, heavier equipment. It'll just be access, just as we typically would if we were going in to do maintenance on these structures. But again, we'll submit, we will hire a contractor to do this work, and the contractor will apply for all those permits and provide access, staging, all those plans that are gonna be required.
Are you okay to be a point of reference if you was to share your cell number or contact number with these folks here tonight?
Yeah, for sure.
What's a good number?
801-678-1428.
You guys get that?
801-678-1428. And the name's Steve Lichty, Liechty. And again, just.
Yeah, we gave that time to come up, state your name, and just go ahead and ask it. We'll need you to come up here though, please, so it can be recorded.
So I'm Tim Nelson. My name's been mentioned a couple times, but they're stating in there that you're gonna make a larger conductor, so you have the capability of going up to 140,000 volts. What guarantee do we have that it stays 46? I mean, 6 weeks from now you change out a couple transformers and boom, we're up to 140,000 volts. I mean, I have concerns. I have 8 small children. 64% chance of increased childhood leukemia. I mean, that's kind of serious stuff to a father. I just want to guarantee that you can't just change things. I don't want to throw the power company under the bus. I've sat down in your Salt Lake City office, been with your lawyers, gone over stuff on other projects. Never good experiences. Our neighbor had you guys show up on their property, start doing work, never contacted him, never asked his permission, threw him a $500 and said, we're sorry, continued on with the project. So I just want to guarantee that that voltage doesn't climb. I'm done.
Thank you.
So the intent, I mean, the only way, and I'm not saying that couldn't ever happen 100 years from now, but that would require Hiram City to also upgrade their whole system, which would require their whole transmission loop around their town, all their substations would have to be converted to 138,000 volts. And if they make a request at some point in the future to do that, that's something we would have to look at, but I believe there's a process if that's considered a change of use that we would have to go through.
It's challenged to make a guess on a hypothetical situation. The laws change year to year, and so that is a challenge to make a guarantee. I think the real question there is, what are the health impacts, right? How are the health impacts addressed? I don't think I have an answer directly to address that. And I don't know that that's what you've come prepared to address. That maybe is something that should be considered.
Just a question on that. Would the company be opposed to a condition on this conditional use permit that said if voltage was raised above the 46,000 volts, you would reappear before the council for an amendment?
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
You can establish a condition as a condition.
We could put a condition that if that voltage is increased, they'd come back.
Have to be applied prior to doing it, go through this same process.
Would the company be opposed to that type of a condition? I know I'm throwing out a new condition that wasn't in there, but I think that's something that could satisfy some of the concerns that we're hearing tonight, and the eventuality that someday we're going to raise that up. We can go through this process again.
And typically that's what we've done in other areas is if we're changing, because it goes through a similar process, we have to upgrade the structures. And so in order to do that, you know, to a higher voltage, we have to go through the process typically anyway. And I think, I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of the company, but I don't think that would be an issue to have that as a condition.
Okay. And I don't know anything about electrical transmission. If we had a condition that said above 46,000, I don't know if there's fluctuation in that, but if we said if it goes above 46,000 volts, then that would trigger this. Is that an issue?
Transmission in this valley is either 46 or 138. Those are the only two options. There's not a in between, so.
Okay.
There's not random fluctuations within that voltage.
I mean, plus or minus 1 or 2%, but it's minimal.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Lichty?
Would you be willing to talk more about the easements and what type of easement would be needed?
It was one of the conditions. Yeah, we'd be happy to do that, so.
Is it a simple access easement, or is it strictly for power, overhead power? Do you know those details?
I'm not certain, and Harold's not here to help with that, but we can sit down and have that.
We can address it with that condition.
Yeah, and on this one particular, easement I have in front of me right now, it does talk about maintenance here, to maintain the said lines, but yeah, again, clarification.
Okay, so what they're talking about, you guys that spoke or that had questions or concerns, this process gives them 10 conditions. This isn't just saying go start the construction. There's 10 conditions that they have to comply with prior to the start of the process. One of them, the very first one, specifically addresses the applicant must provide additional confirmation of the existing easements. Prior to recording the permit, the applicant must provide a construction schedule, includes site plan with location of parking and such. So anyhow, there's definite detail here that has to be accounted for, along with, hopefully you guys can coordinate and communicate any additional questions or concerns. And if there wasn't a resolve on that, I would suggest that you contact the county building department and make these guys aware of it. Commissioners, what do we think?
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion on this with the, if we can add the 11th condition there, and I might need staff's help to craft what would be the best language for that, but that prior to increasing the voltage on this transmission line, the
Above 46K.
above 46,000 volts, the applicant will amend, or would that be the best language?
I wrote,
Reapply or?
what have you got, Angie?
Not have to reapply.
Condition 11,
Yeah, kind of using language for
okay. Then we could say,
Number 4 kind of covers it if they specifically identified it.
the other one's still broad enough to cover other things. So condition 4, like Angie's directing, could cover that. Let's add a follow-up sentence to that that then says, this includes increasing the transmission voltage above 46,000 volts.
That sounds great.
Any other concerns, commissioners?
So did you just revise condition 4, or did you add a condition 11?
Revised condition 4.
Revised condition 4.
Thank you.
I don't know if you wanted to revise 10, the Wild Lakes.
So condition 10 would have some additional detail that Angie sent out that email, is that right?
Just in response from the USU?
Yeah, I think it's primarily requesting notice prior to action
Yes.
or construction. We could adopt that same language.
Basically just notification of at least a week.
Yes.
You ready for a motion?
Yeah. Pending staff, are you good then?
I think so.
So no other questions, concerns, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the Rocky Mountain Power Transmission Line Rebuild CUP with the 10 conditions, 10 amended conditions, and the 3 conclusions.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. This time, anybody that's, yeah, you're welcome to leave if you came only for the items that's been discussed thus far. It might get stinky if you stick around. Okay, turn the time over to staff for further discussion on the Cache Valley Compost Facility.
So last meeting, February 4th, we had the public hearing regarding the freeze-on request. At that time, it was continued for up to 90 days in order for some issues regarding the property itself to be addressed, as well as comments from the public. Since then, we've received a significant number of comments. I believe the first public hearing we had 12. Since then, we've gone up to 56. Those have been forwarded to you. They're on our website also. Of those, I believe only 2 are in support. All the others are opposed. So those have been given to you for review. And then the applicant submitted a letter that was part of your packet to address some of the questions and concerns brought up at that last meeting. And I believe they may have a presentation tonight as well. But with that, that is staff's update.
So, commissioners, so that we keep this organized and flowing, do we want to hear from the applicant with their updates?
I think that'd be good.
Okay. The applicant, or representation of the applicant, come on up.
Thank you. Good evening. As been mentioned here before, that at the last meeting you've asked 2 questions, mainly the surveying of the property that Chris indicated that he would like to see that, and also concerns about providing more information to educate the commissioners so that they would have a good understanding. We're here to address those 2. JUB Engineering is our consultant. They will talk to you on both these 2 issues. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to come back and answer any question you have.
Thank you, commissioners, for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. Yeah, like Issa said, we submitted the letter with answering the questions that were brought up in the last meeting, and also provided the road right-of-ways as requested, which is included in your packet.
Could you give us your name and your title?
Oh, sorry. I'm Gary Vance from JUB Engineers, project manager.
Just one more time.
Gary Vance, JUB Engineers. I guess I'll just briefly give a few remarks and then turn it over the time to Leland Myers, who's a former general manager of Central Davis Sewer District, which runs a similar composting operation as is proposed here. But just some history is, you know, Logan City is building a new wastewater treatment facility. This facility is going to generate biosolids, whereas the lagoons, the biosolids kind of stayed in the ponds. We did an alternatives analysis, looked at around 12 different alternatives, and ended up selecting composting as the preferred alternative for many reasons. It's sustainable, kind of a green technology, reliable. It was determined to be the best solution for the city. Like I said, we addressed the previous comments in the letter that's in your packet, but as you know, there's many new comments that came in, most of them pertaining to odor concerns. We want to be open and transparent with everything on this project with you guys. We heard and care about all these concerns about odor. We intend to address these issues in the design of the facility and in the operations plan. With that, I'll turn it over to Leland Myers, who's an expert in biosolids and can talk a little bit more regarding odors and things. So,
hi, My name is Leland Myers. I'm former general manager of Central Davis Sewer District. Mostly what I am is an old sewer worker. And I don't stand very well, so I'm going to try and do this without collapsing, if you don't mind. Let me tell you, there's a guy named Art Carney. Now, if you're old, you know who Art Carney is. He was in a show called The Honeymooners. And the reason I like that show is because Art Carney was the only sewer worker that's ever been on TV. And he sang a song one time called The Song of the Sewer. And he said, I work in the sewer, it's a very hard job. You know they don't hire just any old slob. You don't have to wear a tie or a coat, you just have to know how to float. And in many cases, we've now taken float to a very high art, particularly when it comes to issues relative to public relations. And composting is 95% public relations. There's a lot of science to it, but making sure that these folks out here don't hate you is the biggest key to a composting operation. That doesn't mean it can't be done right. And it doesn't mean you can't do it. I want to talk just a little bit about composting, a little bit about why it's good, and I want to mention that, oh, by the way, compost is not human waste. Just the same as you're not the hamburger that you ate for lunch, compost is not human waste. It's gone through multiple bioconversions before it ever reaches the stage where it's a sellable compost. Every wastewater plant, here's a flow diagram of a complex wastewater plant, but at the very end of it, it has compost, or it has some kind of biosolids that's being produced. Here's one for Brigham City, much more simple layout, but it's going to produce biosolids, and it's going to be, in their case, composted. We don't get a choice when we treat waste, and it doesn't matter whether that waste is treated at a mechanical facility, a lagoon facility, or in your home septic system. We don't get a choice of saying we're going to make the carbon disappear. We're going to only sequester it somewhere, either in the air, in the land, or leave it in the water. And since the whole point of having wastewater treatment is to remove it from the water, we got to stick it somewhere else. And if we stick it in the air, it's a lot of air pollution. And so composting is a way of beneficially reusing it as a valuable resource. Now, in general, people like wastewater facilities to do something beneficial with their biosolids. They don't want it wasted because it is a resource that has benefit. Why composting? Here's a composting facility. Well, we have lots of carbon waste that we produce. Each one of us produces a lot. And if that waste can be recycled, that's a good thing. You can recycle it. I got a mailer today from Dominion Energy asking about recycling of carbon in order to produce renewable natural gas. That's a use. Not cheap, but it's a use. When you look at the soils in the United States, they've lost in the last 100 years plus 78 gigatons of soil carbon. And so putting the carbon back in the soil is a good thing. And compost is carbon, stable, biologically available carbon. The process is pretty simple. You're going to add carbon, that's the raw organic waste that goes into it. You're going to mix it in with a larger chunk of waste, that would be wood waste usually. You're going to make sure there's oxygen, and you're going to make sure that you have some degree of mixing, and then out of that, it's going to do its thing with the microorganisms and produce a compost product. That is, depending upon how fast you want it to happen, anywhere from 30 to 360 days later, you get a product that's usable and beneficial for people to pick up. Let me tell you my story with it. Well, I started at Central Davis Sewer District in the early 80s, and we just dumped our sludge on the ground. You know, we created this new word. We call it biosolids because sludge sounds icky. And so we created a whole new word for it called biosolids because we wanted something to reflect that it has a benefit or a value. And so we dumped it on the ground, and that didn't work out very well. This facility is a 10 MGD facility, slightly smaller than Logan. They produce 2,000 tons of compost a year. They use an aerated static pile method to produce that compost. And I might add the last point. We've evolved over time, and essentially we made the mistakes that everybody makes in this process. Hopefully you won't go through that learning process. You won't make those same kind of mistakes. So I want you to see this. This is an aerial picture that was taken just a while ago, like less than a week. What you're looking at are the neighbors to this facility, anywhere from $500,000 to $3 million homes surrounding a composting site, within 2,000 feet of the active composting piles. They would build right up to the fence line if the district didn't own all the rest of that property. And we would probably be able to survive.
Is that concrete that's all on?
Yep. Yep, it was because it's more durable than asphalt. They'll both work, but concrete's a more durable, more expensive, but more durable material for working on. What did we learn from all the years we've been doing composting? We learned three things. There's a friend of mine named Genevieve Atwood. She used to be the state geologist, and she used to be a legislator. And she said that the currency of business is money, but the currency of government is trust. One of the things we learned is that you have to develop trust in people to believe that you will do what you said you're going to do in order to run a successful composting operation. So we got three simple lessons. First of all, you have to pick the right process. If you pick the wrong process, you're going to get odors. The aerated static pile is a process that will be and can be operated with minimal odors. I didn't say zero odors, but I can tell you that it'll operate without having people less than 2,000 feet complain very much or at all, because it provides a mechanism to encapsulate those odors. What you
Let me
do...
ask you one quick question, not to interrupt your thing. Those houses that were closest to your property, were they built, at what point were they built? Well after the facility was running, or what point were they built? Were they built before you started?
Yes and yes. A lot of them were built after, and a lot were built before we started composting. So it occurred across the time span. So some came in later in developments, and some were there already.
Okay.
In an aerated static pile compost, what you do is you create a pile, and then what you want to do is cap it with a biofilter or a layer of compost that's finished to help reduce or absorb odors that may come off the pile. You provide an aeration supply, and you manage that aeration supply to keep the temperature of the pile right, but not to drive off so much temperature and vapors that you create odors. So it's a balancing act that you have to continuously manage. It also supplies you with the ability that if at some point you start having a little bit more odor problems, instead of blowing, you can suck. And you suck the air through the pile, and you create a filter that you then filter the foul air through in order to remove the odors. It's got major potential to reduce almost all of the odors. I didn't say all, but most all of the odors. Lesson number 2, you got to have good operation. I noticed that a number of people sent in articles to you on the Timpanogos experience. Timpanogos built the wrong thing and then changed it later to the right thing, after they had lost most of their public trust. And so even though they went to a better operation, it was very difficult for them to return to good trust of the people. And so they made the final decision to close it because it was easier than it was over 5 years they were going to close it than it was to maintain the difficulty they were having with the citizens. So when people get upset about it and think there's an endpoint above which you can't go, that's wrong, because the citizens still have a lot of power when it comes to odor issues. Nobody wants something to stink a lot. Challenge number 2 is you've got to make sure that day and night you're operating it correctly. If you don't, you're going to have failure and you're going to have odors. Challenge number 3 is you've got to be willing to adapt. In any process like composting, there are times when things just don't go right. It's a biological process. And you don't employ the bugs, you just get them for free, which means they kind of do what they want at times. Logan has an ideal situation insofar that they own the landfill. So if they run up headstrong into a major odor problem, within a few days they could haul off everything and take it to the landfill, resolve the odor problem, and then begin again. There are lots of constructs that can be put together for them to succeed with it minimally impacting anyone around. In Central Davis's case, what we did is we constructed a time frame and an odor analysis plan, and we said if the odors reach a certain point, that would be when we started getting complaints, but it's also quantifiable odors, we would move ahead to cover the piles. These are geomembranes that will actually allow very small particles through, but the majority of the odor particles are not going through. They're encapsulated into the pile until they've broken down. And then we said, if that doesn't work, we'll go to the next phase, which is put a building in. Fortunately, we've never done that yet. Some of the required...
Follow-up question, just so that point doesn't get away. Why would you wait until there were complaints to put these membranes on if you already had those?
We don't have the membranes. That's another $1 million.
Okay.
So we chose not to buy the membranes, and we chose to monitor aggressively for odors. So we go out and we monitor all the time. That's one of my plans here, is that you need a detailed odor management plan. And the reason you do it sequentially is because you don't have all the money in the budget at any one time. I mean, biosolids nationwide used to be, when I first started in this industry, they amounted to about 5 to 10% of the budget of a facility. They're now 40% of the budget. They're billions and billions of dollars annually across the country. And so we have to deal with the fact that we're not entitled to every bit of money that the citizen makes. So we start out limiting how much we do in hopes that we can continue, if we have to do incremental upgrades, but not offend the citizens at a level where we get crucified. So in essence, we want them not to smell it 99% of the time, but maybe not 100. So there are many devices out there. We have, top one here is called a nasal ranger. It's a really nice device that sits on your nose, and you can dial in the dilutions of that odor to threshold, which means when you can't smell it and how much air dilution you need. Almost all the ordinances written nationwide that talk about odors are based on a dilution to threshold at your boundary line. So we would measure for that. And if it got to a point where we thought it was going to be excessive, we would take action. The bottom one is called a Jerome, and it actually is a is a measuring instrument that allows you to actually measure parts per billion for odor precursors. We went so far as to become nationally certified in an environmental management system under an ISO program that allowed us to we have external auditors coming in annually to audit every aspect of our program to ensure that we do it right. So there are many things you can do to make sure a biosolids composting facility succeeds. You just have to make sure you plan to do as much as necessary to keep your neighbors happy. Any questions you have of me?
I have a couple questions on this, and they're actually tied together. You talked about where the pollutants go. We sequester these, air, land, or water.
Yeah.
Are there, and in your diagram, you show that there is carbon dioxide leaving there. Are there air pollutants from biosolid composting? Do we see ammonia or nitrates or anything like that coming from these?
There's a whole laundry list of organic pollutants that can come off of a composting site. You know, your big ones you talk about are hydrogen sulfide. That's the one that we associate with rotten odor. But there's dimethyl disulfide, trimethylethene, mercaptans. There are a whole list, and you've got to be aware that all of those have a real impact. Some of those are sensitive down to parts per trillion for the average individual to smell. And there are some people out there who can smell 10 to 20 times to 100 times better than their neighbor. So you have to deal with that variability on all of the precursors. Fortunately, the way you manage your composting pile, if you can remove some of them, you can get almost all of them out, if you do it right. Does that answer your question?
And my follow-up question on that was, you mentioned odor precursors, and maybe you kind of answered that. Those are the ones that you're looking for, are mercaptans, hydrogen sulfide, those.
Right, the meters will measure all or some of those. And what you're doing is you're saying, first of all, what does the meter tell me? And then second of all, what can I smell? That's why you have a dilution to threshold analysis plan in place. And so what we said, if you can get a very faint odor, when I drove into Cache County today, I smelled what I like, some of the odor of an agricultural area. For some people that's offensive, but it's just an odor. Now, I don't smell that well. I mean, personally, I don't think I stink. But nonetheless, I don't have a very good nose when it comes to detecting odors. So I had to make sure I had someone on staff who could detect it at a low level. And then what you do is you go out and you check with one of these instruments to see how much fresh air it takes per volume to decide whether or not you've got an odor that's faint enough that it's not a problem. And so if you have a monitoring program in place, you can eliminate many of those things from being a problem because you catch it before it becomes worse. The other thing you do, and we did, is we had an odor hotline. So we put a phone call 24/7 that said, you call this number, somebody will answer it. And it put an on-call operator in a position where he has to wake up. But if anybody complains anytime, that means we respond and see what the odor is. We dial it in, we check to make sure it's what threshold it is to dilution and how bad the odor is. And if the odor is bad, the very next morning, we're out there trying to find a way to fix it. Those are the things you do to make sure you have a successful composting operation.
Thank you.
You have a question? You have a question?
Yeah, I've got one question here. Will Logan's be similar to this one that you've been describing to us?
Well, Logan, okay, so, I got to tell you.
I mean, this all sounds good to what you were telling us it's been done somewhere else, but I think these people are concerned about what's going to be done at Logan.
Right, and Logan, first of all, I've worked in government for a long time, but before that I worked in the oil industry. And so it was like going from opposite end of the spectrum. In the oil industry, you have a problem, you throw money at it. And in government, well, we try to keep as little money thrown at a problem as we can in order to not get the ratepayers mad at it. So we went into it incrementally, which meant that we did it the cheapest way we could to eliminate the odors. Logan's going in the initial construction with a process, this aerated static pile, such that they can change if they need to. And so they're going to build it right the first time, not poor boy it like we did. So in that regard, I would say the facility will be better because it will be built to utilize these processes.
Not knowing a lot about smell other than what you described a little bit. So a moderate smell, what's the travel distance for it? A middle bad smell, what's the travel distance for it? And a horrible smell, how far is it going to go? I know winds vary, everything else factors there, but what?
So if you're worried about odors, what you really like is wind. Because what you want is turbulence to mix the odor into the air. The worst thing is a condition where you've got a wind speed that's somewhere around 1 meter per second or less. Because now the odor will lift off, and depending on thermal currents, the odor will lift off till it gets a current, and then it kind of stays in one nice clump until it lands somewhere else. So it's not easy to track until you do some vector analysis where an odor is coming from. So if I were to say a very mild odor would be something you would not notice if you went outside. It may be there, but it probably wouldn't offend you. And that's where you're getting to the point is that, you know, we sniff all sorts of odors. And just as an example, when you smell odors, one of the things you do is you only smell what's called the top odor. That's why it works when you spray the Glade freshener in the bathroom after you went in and took a dump. Because all of a sudden you're smelling Glade. It didn't eliminate, and it normally doesn't neutralize the other odors that are there, but the Glade spray is such a strong top odor that that's what you smell. So we went ahead and actually put in air dispersion equipment around the site so that we could spray out into the air in the composting arena a neutralizing and top odor dispersant also. So that you can then tell people, like we did, is we said if you're having a special event and you're worried about it, you let us know. We'll turn the equipment on and make it running during your special event.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask, Benson is known, I'm Tom Wilmore, Benson is known for its inversions where no air moves for weeks, months. How does that affect it?
Well, the inversion, again, it's the slight movement of air that causes the problem. Where our plant is located, it's right next to the Great Salt Lake. And so what we see is a lot of still air that comes off and the moisture-laden air right off the lake that would trap it in that area. So what we figured we had to do is we had to prevent the odors from going off property in order for it not to be an offensive odor to the air. And you can do that if you operate it correctly. You won't get it very far. And you're really trying to prevent these nasty odors, the mercaptans, the dimethyl disulfides, which are these really sensitive, very strong odors. They're the odors of decay, the odors of death. You know, you see a dead animal, and stink pretty bad. Those are the type of odors that carry far distances. But the average gas is coming off, like an ammonia, 50 feet and it's gone, no matter what the ambient condition is.
Okay, thank you to both of you. We will be taking some comments, but let's let these guys finish with their facts and presentation here.
We want to be good neighbors to the community in the neighborhood, Benson area. And as you heard, Leland is going to be in our design team as well. We'll be putting a permit application that will include odor management and operations of the compost facility itself. What I like to suggest tonight, and in the benefit of the council as well as the county, is that we'll put together a compost management committee or board that we will work with, including members of the community, before it gets out of hand so that we would know if they have any concerns, we will be able to address them. At this point in time, we have a budget estimate, but if we have to go beyond that to make sure that we meet the needs of the community, we're prepared to do that as well. But we will not know all of these details until we work with the concerned citizens and find out what their concerns are so that we can address. And that's what we would like to do.
Lisa?
Yes.
How, obviously the landfill currently has a composting operation out there. It's not
Yes.
using biosolids, I
True.
presume, right?
Yes.
But the process you're using to do your composting now is somewhat similar to what you're proposing to do?
Yes.
So you have experience in making and generating the compost and similar to what you're going to do?
True, and we have the equipment also. But we will be adding into to make sure that the concerns that have been expressed to you are addressed. Our current compost system is not aerated, and it's not covered. So those are one of the things we will do. And I want the commissioners to know, as well as the public, even though we are calling this Biosolid composting, it is going to be 2-to-1. 2 parts of green waste, wood chips, and 1 part of biosolids. So this is not going to be 100% biosolids composting. It is better than any other options we've looked into. I'm confident that we can meet the expectations of the public. We have other systems we operate in this community, the landfill in Logan, the landfill in Clarkston, the composting facility, the lagoons, the new one, wastewater treatment plant. We will operate in similar fashion, and we will be listening to the citizens to address their concerns. And that's why I'm suggesting tonight that we will be willing to put together a composting council, composting board, composting committee, whatever we want to call, and mainly from the neighborhood, from the community that is concerned. And we'll work with them.
Well, I just like to address one. I think just stating everything we've read, the biggest and main concern that we have here in everybody is smell. I mean, actually, I guess Judge Wilmore's got some other concerns there, but I mean, smell is no question by far the greatest problem, or one of the greatest problems. And one of the resolutions people have suggested use the Elison property versus the 3200 West property. So those of you that live out there, are we talking, I mean, would there be a mile as the crow flies distance between these 2 locations, or what would you say? 2 miles. 2 miles as the crow flies. Especially for Mr. Myers, what's the impact? I mean, 2 miles, what's that going to do? I guess I could only imagine it would be substantial, but a bad smell is still going to surpass that. Well, you address it.
It's relative to the operation, more so than it is relative to the distance. So if you have a good operation that is producing minimal odor precursors and odor elements, then you don't have to worry about that additional distance. For us, so one of the things we did is we tried to do what we call auto composting. That was a brilliant, no, it wasn't. But it was a really dumb thing. We thought we could just compost it without putting wood chips in it. And we had odors. And we had a whole bunch of people, about this same group size, who were ready to kill me. And I was so dang dumb that I could stand, and we had a meeting right outside of the composting facility in the open air, and I said, see, you can't smell it. And they go, well, we don't smell it, but we do. And I said, well, you can't smell it. And I'm so dang dumb that I didn't do my homework. And then one day I was 6 miles away, and I smelled it. And I thought, this can't be. So then we started doing what are called vector studies. Golly, every time we got a complaint, we could track it right back down to us, because we did a terrible operation with a terrible process. And so what you want to do is you want a process that addresses those in advance, so you don't have those problems to begin with. So 2 miles or a quarter of a mile, not a big deal if you have the right process. I mean, there are a lot of things that people complain about with composting. Odors is the one that they smell. Sometimes they just don't like the looks of it, you know, and so they smell with their eyes. They see it, they know it's got to be wrong. The third one they have a lot of complaints over are aerosols and any kind of vapors that may come off as toxins. Very little information or evidence that there are any significant toxic impact or that aerosols can go further than a couple 100 feet. But it's still a major concern if you got little kids. You say, I don't want it near me. That's the not in my backyard kind of approach. And we're going to do something with it. So it's going to be somewhere in someone's backyard. And so the question is, how do you balance? You guys have a tough job because you have to balance the idea of how do I do what's right for the community at large and yet protect the innocence, if you will, of the citizens right next to it. Not an easy job.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions for him? I do have one more if you're thinking or whatever. So have you guys done any studies? So if this process was entirely to be done out of Clarkston?
No.
Well, okay, but here's my question. Hear me out. You haul the biosolids out, you haul the compost back to sell it. What would the increase in cost? Last time you were telling us, was it 50 ton a day that you intend to produce?
It is much more complicated than simply haul it and haul back. We have wood chip material that is presently in this area, then that needs to be also hauled.
Yes.
And haul it back as well. So it's not that simple. It adds up over time. We're talking about if we build this facility, it will be there for 10, 20, 30 years, who knows? So we have not done that calculation. But it's just the property, either in landfill or, at the landfill where Clarkston is, or in this one or another place. It has to be in somebody's neighborhood. There's no doubt about that. If we're going to be doing composting, regardless where you put it, there will be a cost difference, but it will be somebody's neighborhood.
Yeah.
And landfilling is not a great plan either, simply because once you concentrate it in one location, your odors become worse for that one location. So,
well, I wasn't suggesting that it be put back. It's just simply a question. From our discussion last time, I was under the impression that wherever this is done, you're not going to take it. I wasn't inferring that you're going to take it out there and bury it, but you would have the composting facility located at that location so that, we haven't got too many neighbors out there at the time that are close.
So right now, the green waste collection from all the cities in the solid waste program comes to our landfill and is grinded there.
I failed to think of that.
So that needs to go there. So, yeah.
Okay. Commissioners.
I don't have anything else.
Is that all the city's presentation?
Yes, for now.
All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Commissioners, Eve Davies from Rocky Mountain Power is here. She's got to get back to Salt Lake. And I think, Eve, did you have something you wanted to tell them? And then, if I could, I'd like to just take a few minutes.
Go ahead.
Just for the gallery here, we have had our public hearing on this that we did last time, and so we've done that. But traditionally, when we have people here that have concerns, we have as a commission voted to allow those comments.
So you bring a good point there. Commissioners, how do you feel about allowing some discussion here tonight?
I think we have a large group of people here that taken a lot of their time and submitted comments and that's been traditionally what we've done. But just so everybody knows, we have had that public comment to this point, but I definitely think.
But I don't feel like that was really effective where it was a Zoom meeting,
It
so
was a
I
Zoom
think
meeting
that
as well.
we need to.
And we did have some challenges there, so
Bring
I
our comments
could
to us.
definitely like to open it up to public comment.
If I recall too, the details, Eve, you didn't have a whole lot of preparation time. You weren't notified too far in advance, but come on up.
Good evening, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Are you, with your voice, do you mind taking your mask off?
Not at all. Good evening, Commissioners and neighbors. My name is Eve Davies. I work for Pacific Core, another arm of Rocky Mountain Power, and I primarily manage all the Cutler Marsh area. And as I discussed last time, we're the owner and operator of the Cutler Hydroelectric Project. It's authorized under the Federal Power Act, and so we're regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and we're currently in the midst of relicensing, so we're doing our own fairly wide suite of studies. Logan City is a stakeholder to that process, as are quite a few of the other folks in this room. And we noted that we're extremely concerned about potential negative effects to water quality from Cutler Reservoir. And previous to this, we were unable to find in the application any specific drawings, designs, or detailed descriptions, such as I think what people have a lot of questions about, some of the specifics that we're talking about. We do note that the property contains wetlands and canals, both of those drain directly to Cutler Reservoir. And one of the main issues that's been raised with relicensing and that we're dealing with right now is the water quality in Cutler Reservoir, and I think that's probably something that a lot of folks in this valley and in this room probably share a concern for. And certainly that's a concern for Logan City too, in terms of the comments that we've gotten from them and from other folks in terms of our relicensing process. So we're concerned about the potential for the composting facility to adversely affect water quality in both the short and the long term for Cutler Reservoir and its tributaries. We requested additional details about the project so we can accurately assess the potential for impacts to water quality and our downstream Cutler project, including associated recreation, wetland, aquatic and terrestrial wildlife habitat, and aesthetic resource concerns. We were grateful that the request was deferred at the last meeting because we feel that it requires a more thorough evaluation, specifically in regard to those potential impacts before we move forward. And since then, I've done a little bit more work, and we haven't been able to find any more additional information. So we made very specific requests, and no more information from a detailed design perspective has been forthcoming that would address the request that we made during the February, I believe is the virtual meeting that we had. And so no additional analysis has been offered regarding the potential effects to water quality. We have just recently, literally within the last 2 weeks, and actually prior to that also, we've publicly presented data noting that phosphorus levels in Swift Slough, which is the tributary to Cutler Reservoir that would be immediately downstream of this project and where the current effluent already goes, the phosphorus levels are 5 times higher, and more than that at times, than in other areas of the reservoir. So we again would request that you consider deferring a decision on this proposal, at least until information regarding potential impacts to water quality would be made available or would become available. I also thought about the fact, just given a lot of the work and analysis that we're doing, that something that might be of use would be an alternatives analysis, and you already brought that up at one point, Commissioner. And that alternatives analysis, I would suggest, would note other potential solutions and locations, maybe look at benefits and drawbacks, including costs, to each of those, and that could be locations or processes, all the solutions that are available, and that might help clarify the discussion regarding the request from Logan City. And that may also be of specific use to the Planning Commission, given the potentially controversial nature of the proposal. And I think lastly, we would just say that regardless of the timing of any decision that's made or any additional information that's ultimately offered, we would request that if approved, the the rezone be conditioned to require water quality monitoring in the tributaries to Swift Slough to ensure both near-term detection and mitigation of any potentially developing issues, and ultimately to ensure long-term success of any eventual composting that might occur at the site. So, thank you for your comments.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Eve? Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Did specifically, Leland, did you have a question for Eve, or?
I can sort of, so I have multiple lives. And in one of my other life, I used to be a member of the Water Quality Board when the TMDL for Cutler Reservoir was done, and I was heavily involved in that TMDL process. Second life I have, or third or fourth, I guess, is I'm now the quote-unquote executive director of the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council, which is a group of facilities that banded together, and we spend about $1 million a year on research relative to water quality, primarily for Utah Lake, Jordan River, and the Great Salt Lake. But we've done a lot of groundwater studies that look at the potential for phosphorus to mitigate through a groundwater system out from either a composting or other kind of disposal site. And that would be also anything to do with animal manures. Fortunately, we have a lot of ferrous iron in our ground and a lot of aluminum. And those tend to irreparably bind phosphorus if it's in a soluble state in an orthophosphorus condition, bind it into the soil before it can ever get anywhere. So the groundwater is not a major transmitter of phosphorus into an ecosystem. The primary issues relative to Cutler are associated with the dissolved oxygen, particularly in some of the backwater areas. And so the phosphorus would only be a problem if it could get there and if it were to increase the algae growth. One of the advantages Cutler has, maybe it's not an advantage, depends on how you look at it, is that the reservoir is very shallow. And so the time it takes for a water drop to go through the entire reservoir is short enough that most of the, particularly the toxic algae like cyanobacteria, won't grow in the reservoir.
Okay, Mr. Wilmore, did you have a question for Eve?
Did you have anything else, Eve, about phosphorus?
Yeah, I think I would just add that we actually just looked at phosphorus both in the sediments and in the water column, and there's a tremendous amount of phosphorus that's in the water column. There's also a tremendous amount that's in the sediments themselves, so there's an internal load to the reservoir. And those numbers, what those numbers tell us is that it could be a really long time before we could meaningfully reduce phosphorus in the system. So our concern is simply that adding more, that's a difficulty for us in terms of doing the permitting, getting the 401 water quality certification process that we need to do as a part of relicensing. So.
Thank you.
If I may add one thing here. The new wastewater treatment plant is going to improve the quality of water we discharge to the receiving water. In this case is the Cutler Reservoir. So there is a significant improvement compared to what we've been discharging or what we discharge today. In addition to that, the composting facility is not supposed to discharge any water at all. So even I understand the concern Eve has, but I don't know how we monitor a system that we don't discharge to. And you can require that, but it is required by the state that we discharge no water. However, there will be a stormwater run on and run off. We will mitigate that in our design, and we will not allow stormwater to come in or leave within our property.
So are you proposing a covered facility, or how do you prevent stormwater from getting on the facility?
We can have a ditch system or some kind of a barrier that is stormwater will not come on the compost facility.
Remove the stormwater and treat it, or?
Well, if we have a ditch just before the facility, it will not come to us. But any stormwater on the facility, we will have a bond there that we will treat it, and we will not discharge.
I can add to that, Lisa.
Yes.
Yeah, that was answered in this, in one of our, from the previous time. It talks about how we're going to raise the site slightly, so existing runoff and things would be routed around the site, and anything that lands on the pad, and the pad is asphalt and concrete, so it's not going to go into the groundwater, but it's all going to be routed to an on-site stormwater retention pond and retained and evaporated. There will be no, and actually, that's actually a requirement from the state, that anything that hits the pad needs to be retained on site. You cannot have any runoff from the site, so that's part of our permit requirements and the design.
And I know we're jumping the shark on this one, but so the design on that would be 150% of what year storm?
Yep, it's the county standards, is the rainfall event and duration, and to retain it on site.
And so there'd be a calculation, and you would build that pond based upon a, I don't know, what's the county standards? 100-year storm, or?
The state just changed it recently. It's like 85% now. Is that correct?
100 common storm.
Matt could more directly address that question, our Public Works Director.
9 inches of water storage for every square foot.
9, is that the 100-year?
That's every year. 9 inches of storage, you're gonna need 9 inches of storage for every square foot of where you're gonna.
Surface area.
Surface area.
We'd apply the typical requirements that the county's adopted and the state's adopted.
Again, some of these will be addressed in the design phase, and we'll be working with the county development office, as well as any citizen members that would like to work with us, and we're prepared to address any concerns that may arise at that time.
Okay. Is there anybody else here from an official state capacity that had any comments or? Okay. At this time, commissioners, are we okay to open it to public comment? Go ahead, Judge.
Maybe just some boundaries.
Yeah, just refresh the comments we made to start with. Keep your comments 3 minutes or less. We don't want to be redundant. And anything that's factual, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate your time. It is a hard job that you've got as far as looking at the legislative issues that you've got to, and that's one of the biggest things that you need to look at, and you know that, is the impact upon adjoining or in the area of the individuals there. We would have welcomed Logan City to come talk to us and try to work something out, but we're way past that. Why wasn't that offer made to begin with? It was, here it is, this is what's going to be thrust upon you again. And I appreciate that you've listened. I hope you've read all the letters, the information that's been given to you. I hope you've seen the pictures of the way they've done their discharge and what happened on January 24th as far as this field being completely flooded. There's a lot of issues here, and the impact's great upon these people. These people are from Benson. These are my friends, my neighbors. They're good people. We have borne the problems or the issues concerning smell from many places, mainly Logan City and the sewer system. Now, they say it's not going to smell. You can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig. It's going to smell whatever they do. What we have here today are homeowners, landowners, farmers, ranchers, businesses. We've got Daryl's Appliances from beautiful downtown Benson, okay? And irrigation companies are here. The impacts are just not smells. There's insects, there's rodents, there's land value problems. These are homeowners, landowners, business owners. Blue Springs, well, isn't that ironic? It's called Blue Springs, and we're putting a composting facility right next to it, along it. Even Blue Springs goes on to their property if you look at the maps. It has a high water table. If it's built there, it will affect the irrigators and the drainage for about 200 acres. There are wetlands there. They have other areas to put it that's not sensitive like this area is. They talk about, well, trust us. If you look at their 3-page sheet, it's all 2 pages is how beneficial composting is. And then the last page, they talk about very small paragraphs of odor, water and wetlands and runoff. Nothing. And we would have been happy to sit down. But that trust and that, what they're proposing now, it's just another shell game to get this zoning done. How much more does Benson need to bear? You know, we have the sewer system there, Gosners, other things that are there. We have their polishing ponds. There's other places to put. Benson is a gateway, and I hope you got that letter from the businesses. 3200 West, I mean, is a gateway for businesses along with Airport Road. And it was signed by every business person that I could get in Benson. Benson will continue to grow. And these are good people, and the impact is very, very great upon them. And we ask you to please consider that. It shouldn't be delayed. Make the decision now. Don't allow the rezone. Make the decision now. All it is just let's trust us. We'll put together a committee and we'll be done. Benson doesn't have the money, because we're not incorporated. We can't hire engineers. We can't hire paid consultants that you've seen here today. We just have good, ordinary people that don't want this at this time. Thank you.
Come on, you guys are welcome. Just get a line, I guess, or just state your name and give us your facts.
Okay, my name is Katie Fuller, and I'm a resident of Benson, and I'm opposed to the rezone. Each resident here, we each have a septic tank. That's what we do to contain our waste. So we do not contribute to the waste that would be put on the site at all. So we would just ask that a different location be considered, so Logan City can take care of their own waste on their own, within their own boundaries. I appreciated the picture that Mr. Myers posted of their facility, because their compost facility was right next to their sewer system, their sewer treatment system. And that's exactly what we would like to see. We would like that to be contained and all nearby, near their city, within their boundaries, and not just pushed on us where we don't even contribute to that. I have a question about where Logan City is going to get 100 tons of green waste per day during the winter. They need that ratio, that 2-to-1 ratio, and when green waste isn't growing, they don't even collect it during the winter. So are they just going to be piling all the biosolids up throughout the winter and not composting? I just have a question about that. I don't understand how that would work through the winter. And then I also have a concern about the address that was on the notice that was sent. I don't believe that address was correct as well. The 1400 North, 3200 West. I don't believe it's at 1400 North. So if we could look into that as well. Thank you.
We'll address all them questions at the end. We'll just write them down. And
John Drew, Providence City Mayor. I'm speaking in favor of the petitioner's request. Let me give you a little bit of background. Our city council unanimously and strongly favored the green waste program that Logan City has proposed, including blending. Also serve on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, Cache County, also Logan City Wastewater Rate Setting Committee. I represent the city of Providence. We had a robust discussion amongst our board members, the Solid Waste Advisory Board, about the solid waste, blending it with green waste. Robust discussion this past year. One thing I might mention, we have an example here in Cache Valley of what Logan City is trying to do, and that's in Hiram. Hiram operates a mechanical wastewater treatment plant, and they take the biosolids and blend it with green waste. So if there's a problem here in the valley, we probably recognize it happening in Hiram. And I've toured the plant several times, and I walk right next to these ponds where they're circulating the liquids, and they run a great operation. I don't smell anything. I've seen where they spread the material out before they blend it. I don't smell anything. I'm not an expert on wastewater treatment plant. Also in a prior career, I worked for a CPA firm. We had a contract with the Environmental Protection Agency. I was the lead auditor. We audited wastewater treatment construction grant programs. Besides auditing the expenses, we got tours of the facility, and probably a couple dozen treatment plants, this is 30 plus years ago, but most of them blended the biosolids with green waste. And I don't recall, I'm not an expert, I don't recall any of them ever giving off odors. I mean, they showed me samples of it. This gentleman, Leland, said if they run a good, clean operation and they monitor what they're doing, the odors aren't going to be there, and it can be done. And in the 30 years since I've been doing that, I'm sure the technology has improved vastly. So, again, I'm in favor of Logan City's petition. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff Kunzler. I own land out there. I also actually lease that property at the moment. I don't know, there's several things that come to mind. One of them, I guess, if this sounds like a good thing, a wonderful thing, make room in Providence for it. We are not in favor of it. As Tom Wilmore stated, that area is a wetland. It's not only a wetland, but as he said, all that water in the area, it's the low spot. It runs to that spot, and then it runs into Blue Springs. And we have an issue with having too much water going into Blue Springs, and they want us to slow that down. So those are issues we have. We would ask you to treat them the way you would treat us as farmers. We are asked to watch how we fertilize our ground so it doesn't go into out to Cutler. In fact, there's been lawsuits and all kinds of things happen. But the other issue too is when I got word of what was going on, Mr. Amoud told me that we can't put it there by the landfill or where we have our other area or other compost because of the smell. It would be too close to the other houses. So which is it? Do we have a smell or we don't have a smell? If we don't have a smell, why can't it be there close to their compost so they don't have to take it back and forth? It's right there. They have room. They have the old landfill. They could make room for it. If it is a smell and if it is a problem, take it to Clarkston so that they don't have to spend $1 million to cover it afterwards and take care of it. We have a trust issue with Logan City. That is the big problem here. They say they're going to do this. It doesn't happen. It's like they're the ones that take care of the water out there, and we benefit from it because we use a lot of water to water our properties. Now, the system got plugged up, and water ran over, and you saw the pictures of that. That ran for 3 days. As soon as I go past there every day, as soon as I saw it, I made a call, and nothing happened for I don't know how much time. Tom might be able to tell you. The polishing ponds, they weren't supposed to smell. They smell. We can sit at my house, and I can tell you which way the wind is blowing by which flavor of smell is coming. I can tell if it's from the east because it's Gosner's. I can tell if it's coming from the south because it's the polishing ponds. We don't need to add to it. And the other thing, they're supposed to spray for mosquitoes. We're right next door to the polishing ponds. In fact, we sold them property there. It doesn't get done. We spray for the Benson or the abatement, but that doesn't get done all the time. And I'm sure that we'll be told that they take care of it and everything gets done in a speedy manner, but I yet have to see that. Thank you for your time and I appreciate it.
I'm Nathan Ricks. I live in Benson. One of my concerns is, and this is a continual problem, every once in a while, every 3 or 4 years, we get a rodent problem, voles and rats, voles especially. But along comes winter and we get a quick freeze, or we get a rain or a thaw and then a freeze, and it wipes them all out. You're talking about a critter that has a gestation period of 21 days. Rats, mice, voles. Think about this. The best place for these critters is a place that's warm in the winter, with water close by, and food. I mean, that is ideal for these critters, and we could have an amazing population of rats and voles and mice that carry lots of diseases that will affect not only our ground near us, but they spread out. As soon as spring breaks, they're gone. And you can't tell me that these things that they're putting over it is going to protect and keep the mice out. All that'll do is create an incubation place for them. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul Carden. I'd like to speak against this project. If you go back to your notes from when they did the polishing ponds in 2001 or thereabouts, Kevin Hansen was in charge of it, and a couple of the conditions for the use for them to get the permit was, number one was the mosquitoes. Number two, that I'm sure of because I attended the meeting, was that they were supposed to allow stream bank access along the Swift Slough, where they built the polishing ponds. On the north side is the Swift Slough. And they haven't done that. Logan City got their fences right out there on the Swift Slough, and nobody can even walk along there. People used to shoot ducks along there. The fellow that needed to do said he wanted to do homework. He needs to do a lot more homework, because if this were an agricultural project, it would never be allowed. We have what we call a nutrient management plan we have to put forward, and you're not allowed to put anything along a body of the state's water within 100 feet of the state's water. And during the winter time, when there's snow cover or the ground is frozen, you're not allowed to even bring it near there at all. Whether it's contained or not, you're not allowed to bring it on there. So the minimum setback along the Blue Springs Creek is a minimum of 100 feet for agriculture, and I suspect this is more toxic than agricultural, so I suspect it'll have to be further than 100 feet. Now that whole property is approximately, is it 600 feet wide, or maybe a little less than that? You take 100 feet off of that on the north side. On the south side, if you go back to Michael Gleed, it'll tell you where when they did the original survey for the Logan Hayland survey out there, they've mapped out where the roads go. And there's a road right on the south side of that property. So if you take, and then the setback from that road, if you take 100 feet out of each side of that, and say it's 600 feet to begin with, there's not a whole lot of that property left. It's a very poor choice but there. But you would not be allowed to even put any waste at all. If this were manure, you wouldn't be able to haul it there from November till April, anytime the ground is frozen or there's snow cover. And I suspect that the same things apply here. The fellow that's from the water quality would probably know these regulations better than I would, but this has been my experience, because I do farm along Cutler, and I'm not allowed to be within 100 feet of it from there. The general slope of this property is to the north and west, the long distance, and it all slopes right to all of the drainage from that goes directly into the Blue Springs Creek. That's a little tongue twister for me, sorry. This project should be rethought. The fellow doing his homework needs to go back and do some homework, because he's really naive when it comes to it. That they have to build their water containment for a minimum of 25-year storm event, which at my place we use the Trenton map, and that's a 2.5-inch storm event over 24 hours is the 25-year. In where I am, you can't even run our septic lines within 100 feet. And I believe that's a regulation from the county. You can't even run your septic drain lines within 100 feet of any body of the state's water. So you got the issue with the road on the one side, the setbacks from the other side, and this is a really poor site for this. We're all in favor of composting, and I think they're absolutely right. If you mix enough straw or weeds or green waste, it will hold the smell down until you go to turn those piles, and guess where the ammonia goes then? And they have to is it 3 times you have to heat them up and cool them down and turn them each time to do the proper composting. It has to reach, I believe it's 145 degrees within the pile, and then you turn it again. You might have to water it. Their first concern is this is a slurry, and they have to de-water it. But to get the proper moisture has to be there for it to even create that heat. So I've got a lot more to say, but I think my time's up. Thank you.
Any other comments? We commend you guys as a community for coming out and representing yourselves. It's awesome to see representation here.
Hi, I'm Sean Thane, resident of Benson. We're at 2873 North, 2400 West. Looking at where this is at, I would guesstimate from the maps, we're probably about 100 feet higher than elevation-wise than where this is at. Every year we deal with flooding. My aunt and my grandma, who is now passed, and that's where I live at now, they built their houses up about 4 feet from the actual level. They brought in some dirt, built it up. Foundation is about 2 feet above the ground level there. That's where the foundation starts. They have a pump down in there. There's times where that pump just constantly runs. And I would say from the Zoom meeting that I attended, it sounds like they have not really thought about groundwater coming in, how they're going to stop groundwater coming in, because it is a definite issue. And there's times where I have to go outside and I've got to pump the ditch every single day. On top of that, I did notice the gentleman that was talking that was from the South Davis Water District, or not Water District, the sewer plant there. Actually, if you go to their website right now, right there on the home page, there is a notice that actually North Salt Lake has filed a I don't think complaint's the right word. North Salt Lake has filed maybe an action against them due to an odor smell that began in May of 2020. And like I said, that's still up on their website. I'm not sure if it's been resolved. I can't see anything that says it's been resolved. We're almost coming up to a year now. So I'd say odor is definitely an obvious issue. And North Salt Lake did say they were going to start fining the Davis sewer ponds $100 a day if it didn't get resolved. And not really sure. I did not see the gentleman who was talking, but he might be able to answer if they have fixed that, what caused the odor. But like I said, if you go to the website right now, that's right there on their front page, and it didn't quite seem like they had resolved it yet and whatnot. So,
thank you.
Can I just address that quickly?
Actually, if you don't mind, let us just finish the public comment, and then we'll kill these all at once. Is there any other comments from anybody in the audience?
I'd like to comment.
Anybody's welcome to. Just state facts if you have some new ones.
Oh, I don't know if I have facts. I have opinions. Is that okay? My name is Emily Thompson. I live in Benson, and I would just like to speak against this. I do think that you presented some great information about composting, and it sounds like it's a nice alternative for what to do with the waste, waste is definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. My concern is that we've taken enough waste in Benson, quite frankly, and I don't see why this needs to be our problem. I think we've had enough. And you know what, Providence almost volunteered. Let's look into some other places. Thank you.
My name's Jeff Ricks, and a couple of things that have come to my mind. I'm involved with Daryl's Appliance, and the year before last, there was so much water to the west of us, which is towards the direction of where this property is, that we actually had waves of water coming right up to our building. I couldn't believe it. I go, where does all this water come from? So I think some years there's horrendous problems with water. And I know that the poor people that live down on that west of Daryl's Appliance, they have been drowned. I know the county has come out many, many times. There's just not the money it takes to get that water drained away. But you know, and so it's in their plan. Eventually, it'll get done. But it's still a problem. If Ross Olson was alive, he could really tell you about the water problems and what they have lived with, and the sump pumps that they've had to run across the road, and the berm we had to build so they could pump it over across on our side of the property so that it would go into the ditch and end up in the river. Also, my mother, Betty Ricks, she come up with the phrase "in beautiful town Benson," and a lot of people, when they come into our store, they'll sing it. We've had people sing that phrase, and can you imagine driving into Logan and going past big piles of human manure and saying, "Welcome to Benson, welcome to Logan"? Come on, that's just put it out in the middle of somewhere where it can't be seen. It's an unsightly thought, and that was mentioned. And the other thing is I am part of the mosquito abatement district ever since it got started, and we asked Logan City to come on board. You know, they have a big population, and they said no. Well, we have our own program. We'll take care of it. Well, how well they take care of it, I don't know, because I think that Cache County mosquito abatement goes all the way around Logan pretty much and takes care of mosquitoes for them. So they're getting a free ride. I would like a straw poll from the communities around Cache County, how they feel about Logan City as a partner. You know, you hear stuff about Clarkston, how happy they were, ambulance services from over the years. I don't know. I'm just not sure I trust that they would be a great partner to do what they said. And also in the presentations, I heard a lot of the smells will be okay if. I heard too many ifs. I don't trust the ifs, and I'm not sure I trust Logan City at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Heath Worley, and I am a landowner. I own land directly west of the proposed site, across from 3200 West. I find that ironic. I was never notified that anything was going to happen. I wasn't sent a letter. I wasn't given any notification. The elevation dropped from 3200 West down to my land. Everything drains down to it. They're talking about building a pond. That pond would drain probably down onto me if it got any water into it at all. I am a resident of Logan, and one of my concerns through this whole process is the cost. Everything that was talked about, more money, more money, more money. Why can't they take the north section of the sewer ponds, drain it, line it with whatever they need to do? The solid waste is here, the pond would be here, the transportation would take 10 to 15 seconds, and they could do that all day long and save us taxpayers money. The treatment facility is already way over budget, which means our sewer costs have gone way up, and this is just another nail in the coffin that our sewer costs are going to go up even higher to pay for a facility that could be taken care of somewhere closer and fulfill the needs. And as a landowner, I'm just really concerned about getting all the waste water that would come off of it. They say they can contain it. I don't know how you can contain groundwater when the groundwater, I mean, I dig a hole and it fills with water within 2 seconds, so just of my elevation in the groundwater. So those are my concerns. Just as a Logan City citizen, I don't want to pay any more taxes to have my sewage refuse when there could be simpler alternatives. And I am a landowner that could potentially see significant damage through leaching of the water and different things. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If you intend, come on up, and then when our line's done, we'll be done.
Cameron Looney, resident of Benson. We've heard about the odor. We've already heard about the water. We've already heard about the costs. We're not against composting. Composting is an excellent, responsible way to take care of this issue. What we are saying is, I'll just echo what Tom said, is don't delay this vote. Vote no. Let the city find another site that is not a lowland, not a wetland, not going to have any of the negative effects that it would if this site moves forward.
Thank you.
Randy Reed. I'm a resident of Benson. My question is, what guarantees do we have? It's mentioned that if it's properly maintained and managed, what guarantees do we have if it's not? How do we address the issues or stop the issues that happen if it's not properly maintained? What do we do? It seems like we have to have something in place ahead of time to ensure that that does happen. And if it doesn't, we have some way of rescinding maybe the use of it or something. I just don't trust the government. I love America, but everybody always talks, and it's the same with small business. If it's maintained and managed properly, it'll be thriving, but how often is that done? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared Weiser, live in Benson. I just want to make the quick point that anyone who's ever had a flooded basement knows that concrete will not contain that water. It's going to find its way to Cutler Reservoir.
Was you wanting to comment too? There's a couple of you still.
Mary Lane Benson. One of the things that's not being talked about is just the traffic of trucks. We've been living with holes on the right-hand turn for years, and now it's going to be an endless barrage of trucks going up and down. And lastly, I'd like to say I think it's all about respecting the fact that this is agricultural land. Why is it now all of a sudden that we just have to give it up as agricultural land when that's what it was meant to be, and that's all the people that live here, that's what they want it to be also.
Thank you.
Chad Falsliff, I am a resident, live north of there. I also am the facilities and maintenance manager or director for a company here in Logan. We have 2 wastewater facilities that we maintain and I help maintain. And I also was involved in the sewer plant at Northrop Grumman now, in the maintenance side of that. I don't know that the gentlemen that are planning this have done the maintenance side of that and what it takes to maintain in a corrosive environment. I suspect that we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at a little facility here in Logan replacing motors because of the corrosion. I hate to tell you, manure does make corrosion. It's fine and dandy for the first year, but the second year, when it's rusted and you can't get the motors out, there's a cause, and that's caused by the hazardous waste that's there. Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we're gonna, commissioners, are we okay to close the comment and get the applicant back up here, Mr. Myers, to address those 4 questions? We in favor of that?
The applicant, maybe.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Myers.
Well, I was just going to add on the couple of issues. Number one, the odor issue that was addressed by the gentleman.
that was on a website. It's for South Davis Sewer District. The one I would have presented is Central Davis. The South Davis Sewer District's odor issues are relative to a waste-to-energy project they built, where they were converting all sorts of organic pollutants that would be brought into a natural gas product. And it does have odor some issues, and they're resolving those odor issues.
But it's nothing to do with your facility.
No, nothing to do with that.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
It's not compost.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Here's the questions that I had, and Mr. Asud? Hamouz? Okay, so the questions I have, how are you guys going to accommodate for 100 tons of green waste today? Where's that going to be stored or hauled in when you're in the middle of composting? What's the address of the facility? Rodents? And maybe Mr. Myers should speak even to that, what he deals with. Setbacks that were addressed, has that been totally looked at based on this property? I mean, what actual space do you have, width, north to south? And then there was an issue, help me, I put it as NSL issue, but I don't.
North Salt Lake.
The North Salt Lake, that's been resolved, thank you. So, let's hear your, and if you need me to restate them, I'll be happy to, but
Sure.
Then maybe if Mr. Myers could address the rodent deal.
Sure. The quantity of green waste we receive about 16,000 tons a year and growing.
How much was that?
16,000 tons a year of green waste is what we receive.
1,000 ton.
18,000 last year. So based on our calculations, we have plenty of that material to apply 2-to-1.
So would you stockpile that for wintertime use then?
Yes, and we generally use winter to grind because we receive so much of that material in the summer.
So remind us what your daily amount that is generated.
Green waste is generally from April 1st until November 30th.
I mean for the biosolids.
20 to 30 tons early on, but it could go up to 50 when the facility is in full capacity, which we are designing it to 21 million gallons a day. So right now we will only be receiving about 13, 14 million gallons a day. So it will grow as we grow.
But 50 tons per day?
Maximum.
Maximum.
When it is in full capacity.
That's per day? Okay.
Yes.
Which is maybe just to help people understand how much that is that about 5 dump trucks or so?
Depending, we use 10-ton dump trucks, but we intend to use bigger than that. So it will be about 2 to 3 tons, 2 to 3 trips.
2 to 3 trucks a day?
Yes.
Only with raw product?
Yes.
What percentage of water is in the biosolids as they?
85% water.
85%
Yeah,
water.
15% dry solids. But it is like cake when it comes out.
But, okay, at 85% liquid, what point do you immediately start turning it and mixing the 2-to-1 ratio?
We will have, with the wood chips, the design of the facility will have a mixing area where we would have the wood chips and then we will dump the solid waste, the biosolids on top of the wood chips. So immediately it mixes up.
Let me throw one thing out there. Ideally, you'll have a mixing equipment. And it could be a truck-mounted mixing equipment. That's what we use to blend the two. The one gentleman talked about the mixing of the piles. The reason you build an aerated static pile is so you don't mix it. Because the mixing process is a release mechanism. So the reason you build the aerated static pile is you let it sit for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks before you ever touch the pile. That way, any kind of odor precursors that are formed are reabsorbed into the wood waste. Okay. And so you don't mix the pile very often.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask.
Okay, so we talked about the green waste, we discussed that. How about the address of the facility? Is the specific address of the center of that field is at 1400 north.
Property is 47 acres, but there's a map in your handout that shows where these 10 acres would be.
Okay. I know exactly where the property is. I just didn't know if you had a more address specific.
The 1,400 that they gave you is further south, whether you look at Google Maps or Google.
Where the fireworks place is, or?
No, not that far down.
Okay.
But it's, and I raised that with Angie the other day.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe some of the concern was the noticing was happening on the address and not the parcel number, but then noticing happened for the parcel number.
So does that maybe allocate for why Mr. Worley wasn't notified if we had a,
Well, the notification is 300 feet, which in unincorporated county does not go very far, I believe. I was just looking at his property, I believe about 1,500 feet away.
okay.
That wasn't Logan City's fault. That comes from the planning and zoning.
Well, yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure that there was an understanding why that happened.
If you're looking on the GIS, they've got the ponds that are already there, and next to them is a piece of property that Paul Card owns, and then next to that, going south, is the 47.12 acres.
Okay.
We can,
Okay.
Mr. Chair or Vice Chair, we can show that on the screen if you'd like.
Well, I'm just restating the questions that were asked. So we got the address. Okay, Mr. Myers, if you could talk to us about rodents at your facility.
We don't have any, no, that's not true. We don't see any real problem with rodents. We rarely ever see them. We don't trap them. We don't have any problem with it. While I'm sure rodents would like to be there, the temperature in the middle of the pile is 145 degrees, and they don't exist well at that temperature. So they
Fried
won't be
rodents.
able to live around the external edges of the pile that they would.
Okay, okay.
The state also requires that we put together a rodent management plan that will be required to have for this facility.
How about setbacks? Have you done your logistics on how much actual usable space you have? And as Mr. Carden was one that presented this, do you have to comply with the same standards that an agricultural individual does, maintaining that 100-foot distance from a waterway?
What we're asking right now is just rezone or zoning. But when it comes time to address those with the development office, absolutely, we're prepared to address any requirement is that development office has.
Okay.
I can add something to that, just, the parcel, the 47 acres we're talking about in your sheets here, it shows the 10 acres that are proposed, and the 47 acres is 1,100 by 2,200 feet. And we're showing it on the south end of the property, outside of the road right-of-ways, and well, in it, probably 500 feet from Blue Springs Creek. Additionally, the site's going to be built up 18 inches, 2 feet, 2.5 feet, depending to get out of any groundwater concerns. So.
But can you answer?
We're going to capture all the.
Let's not debate right now. We're just getting statements. Hey, Mr. I apologize. Forget your name.
Vance.
Do you know from your experience? Do you guys have the same restrictions though that agriculture does? Does this facility have to maintain a 100-foot distance from a waterway?
That will be in the permit from the state, and I believe we don't, but Leland can.
The setbacks are defined in federal code 40 CFR Part 503, and it's stipulated to be 50 foot from any water in the state. And then those are re-mimicked in R317, the Utah State Code. And so it's a 50-foot setback from a water of the state. But that's a defined water of the state.
That's the same ordinance within the
Yeah,
county.
the only reason those questions were even brought was just to try and appease that we're listening and digesting what's being asked, so.
Again, it's been projected right there so you can see it.
Commissioners.
So if you do the math at 1,800 ton a day, that's 49 ton a day. That's only a 1-to-1 ratio that makes it, not 2-to-1. If they have 18,000 tons a year, and you divide that by 365 days in a year, that's only 49 ton a day, the green waste that they're gonna put on, and they're putting 50 ton, that's only 50.
The thing we don't know though, Darren, I wouldn't even profess to know, but if you take that 50 ton and you take 85% of the moisture out of it, now you're talking about 8 ton a day. But what point is that? I have no idea. I just appreciate your.
Should come out of the sewer press, there should be no water. There'll be a small amount to it. There won't be all solids. With the presses that I've been associated with, there's very little water in it.
Okay.
That may be true on industrial waste, but on municipal wastewater, the best you can get is 30%, and almost all of the equipment that you commercially utilize is getting somewhere between 15 and 20%.
It looks kind of dry, but it's still like 85% water. It looks like dirt or slightly wet dirt.
You can make snowball out of it.
Okay, well, I think we appreciate every.
I ask one more question.
You bet.
Mr. Vance.
Yeah, Mr.
I had a follow-up question going way back to the very first of your presentation. In that, you said that you had considered 12 alternatives. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
In the first presentation we had, you presented somebody else that presented it, but they presented 3 alternatives there.
A lot of I think probably there was like 3 conceptual alternatives, but some of them were, hauling to dispose in different landfills or take it up to Idaho and things like that. And then there were solar dryers and thermal dryers. So there's, of the different types of dryers, there's 4 different types, but the person who presented last time may have just rolled it into one technology perhaps, but.
Okay, yeah, we didn't hear anything about drying processes or anything like that. And that was my follow-up question on that, was if we considered 12 different alternatives, that would have, I think that would have been germane to our overall understanding of where we've got at this point.
Yep.
What alternatives are there and how viable are those? We were kind of given these are the 3 alternatives that are possible, and so I just want to point out that that would have been good information.
Okay, no, thank you for that. I mean, one of the reasons some of them were thrown out due to cost. I mean, the drying, you can dry them straight to Class A, and it's $30 million, and plus a high O&M and mechanical parts that are difficult to maintain and reliability. So composting is simple and creates the same product, and it's something the city's already doing, just expanding their operation. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Please know that we've listened to every one of you here tonight, both sides of the fence. It's been brought to my attention that we have a serious problem as planning commissioners that at 8 o'clock we turn to pumpkins. So we'll get past that. We do need to take a motion to extend this meeting if we're going to do so.
Why don't we ask this, Chris, for the discussion items, how much time do you need for those?
You have easily an hour or 2 for
What?
those discussion items. It depends on how much time you're willing to spend on them.
That was the wrong answer.
Because those are heavy topics we're talking about that come up. I know this is a significant one, but those are pretty significant legal topics that we can't just glance past. So I know we spent a lot of time with this item. But the challenge is that the longer we delay these, the more risk we put the county in of problems. So I don't know what the commission's idea might be to address these if you want to stay later tonight or if you want to set up a special meeting in the future. We probably need to address those sooner than a month away.
The sewer deal?
I'm talking about the compost facility, the small-scale slaughter facility, and cannabis production establishments.
What are you guys good for time tonight?
Can we accomplish all of that? Yeah. Can we accomplish that in an hour? I mean, those two other items are.
We've already made some progress with the small-scale slaughter facility. I'd give you an update on that, and you can determine how you want to move forward there. The cannabis piece is more of the kickoff for a discussion. We're going to show you some maps and how we're trying to restrict where some of this rezoning might occur for allowing medical-type facilities for production of medical cannabis might occur. But those are heavy discussion items, so you're going to have a lot of questions and a lot of discussion. I want you to feel like you're not too late in the night, that we can have a good discussion. But I also want to make sure that we're acting in a timely manner.
Can you clarify one thing? I was under the impression that you said tabling this for another 30 days on the sewer deal can't wait.
I think he was
I
right.
said it'd be wise to do something with those three. Those are significant items. With the compost facility, it's a recommendation. And just for everyone here, for the compost facility, this is a rezone process. A lot of what you've been discussing tonight is not at a rezone level. It's at what you would discuss for a conditional use permit. And so while your questions are valid, the commission can address them. They can take them into consideration as part of a consideration for the rezone, but they can't apply conditions to this request. They can only apply those conditions at the conditional use level. So your questions are good, the comments are valuable, and they will affect kind of the decision that happens on both sides. So keep that in mind from a process standpoint. All those things will have to come up again with the specific details. So whatever the commission decides to do tonight, it's going to be heard by the council. There'll be another public hearing. So I would just encourage the commission, if there is a consensus as to what they want to do, I would recommend moving it somewhere, the compost request, the rezone request, unless you feel like there's going to be more new information that comes, or if you just want more time to think about it. Either one of those things are legitimate things.
I didn't bring my last month's packet. I don't think well, it's you either approve it or you don't. That's basically it, right?
You can make a recommendation for approval, you can make a recommendation for denial, you can make any recommendation. You can make a recommendation that you want the council to look at it, and you can list out concerns you have.
That's the other thing about this process, maybe that's worth mentioning, is that it goes from us to the council.
That's
It's not a final decision tonight, whether we approve it or deny it. It's still gonna go to the council, and those good folks will get a chance to hear your concerns as well.
Thank you, Chris.
Mr. Chair, could I just restate those two things to make sure that it's clear? That the planning commission can recommend a rezone, can recommend against a rezone, but they can't make the decision. So whatever they recommend, it's not final either way. They also can't, either here or at the county council level, do a rezone with conditions. It's either a rezone or not. And then if it was rezoned, then when the application comes in to use the land, then conditions can be put on it. Just want to maybe make sure that that process is clarified.
So, Mr. Chair, it sounds like we've got quite a few things to do. If it's, unless somebody wants to hit me or whatever, I could make a motion to extend the meeting up to an hour.
Okay.
I'll second.
There's a second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so let's get to business on this.
I had a question. I don't know if Mr. Hammoud or Mr. Vance should answer it, but I think in a lot of ways, it all comes down to why this property. And I don't know if you want to go into that anymore or address any of the surrounding concerns that people raised as far as the polishing ponds or those kinds of things, but might be good to hear some responses for those questions.
Sure. We've looked into several other properties within the area. Of course, we own this one. And we've looked only the properties that are owned by Logan City. Of course, we have the wetlands that are already permitted just north of this. We can take the sludge, the biosolids, and dump it there. But our ability to compost it, it will be limited. We cannot do that on that property. But we will be allowed to store it there, to put it there and allow it to decompose and disappear that way. It's an option, but it will also smell terribly because our ability to aerate or do anything with it is zero. So the other option is the lagoons that will be vacated. The lagoons will not be available to us at least for another 3-4 years. Plus, significant part of the lagoons themselves will still be used as integral part of the treatment system we have. They will be used as a equalization basins. There are times we will get more flow than we can handle. Our intent is to put it in the lagoons and bring it back. So the lagoons will continue to be used in that capacity.
You also have the innocent property and property where they're composting now.
Yeah, the Eliason property that suggested here is mainly wetland. We've only been permitted the area that is presently the wastewater treatment plant is going to go. Now, we might be able to use some part of it, but again, to move it from there to another location will just make it difficult. Existing composting facility is less than, it's about 4 acres and a change. Is that correct? Yeah. And we need minimum of 10 acres. So we will continue to use the existing compost facility to minimize traffic to this site. So what we're going to do is public citizens that have a pickup truck of wood waste, we will not send them to this new facility. They will continue to bring it the current facility. And the finished product will also be brought back into the current facility. So if somebody wants to take a load of compost, a yard or 2 yards, they don't have to go there. So our intent is not to send a lot of traffic there, to have the traffic continue to come to where the current landfill is. So those are the options we looked into.
So that Edelson property shows right now is 28.7 acres. But you're saying,
It's about 80.
well, I'm going from the road east, from the sheds east, there's an L shape there.
There's significant wetlands. There was over a year delay on, simply because of the wetlands in the construction of the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay. Well, that's not gonna, that's helpful for your, okay. Did you have any other questions? Okay. Mr. Watterson, do you have any other questions or concerns?
I have some discussion on it, but no questions.
I have one question from the county. From a legal standpoint, are you able to offer any legal advice?
A rezone decision is quintessentially a political legislative decision. You aren't putting the county, as long as you do your process right and hold the hearings that you're supposed to, which you are, you're not putting the county at risk legally by making a decision. This is just one of those hard decisions, and you don't have to make the decision. You make a recommendation and then the council can follow it or not, but it's a political legislative decision of whether to do it, but you're not putting the county at risk legally one way or the other as long as we follow the proper process.
Okay.
As we reach a conditional use point, though, then we are really obligated, right? It is a shall approve. We can put conditions on, but once we leave the rezone, it's a shall approve, and our only recourse is to put conditions on the project if it's permitted within that zone.
That's correct. If the project is permitted within the zone that you rezone it to, and they meet the conditions, and the conditions have to be just to address problems that might arise. You can't put conditions that aren't related to the problems that might arise. As long as they meet those conditions, you must give the permit. So yes, making that initial decision to rezone then opens the door to the permitted uses.
So, commissioners, are you guys comfortable? Do you want to just hold a vote, or do you each want to share amongst ourselves here? your stand now and a couple of comments as to why.
I would be happy to share. I don't know if the rest want to comment. You know, I mean, this is definitely a challenging issue. In addition to what we've just discussed here with, you know, the rezone is the point. Once this is rezoned, a conditional use permit will be issued, because that's what the law requires us to do. And so this is the point, and to Mr. Luthe's point, we have a decision to make tonight, but the repercussions of which are, you know, not a legal repercussion. So just to bring that out. Major concern I have are alternatives. I felt like we were given here are 3 options that we looked at, and there are other alternatives, and we've heard about those from Mr. Myers tonight and from Mr. Vance about other options that are taking place in the state. In working with various sewer districts around the state, I've seen some landfill this material, some do thermal treatment. There are other options, and so that's one of my major concerns is that we haven't been given a full consideration of what the options. It's this process. It's this piece of property, and that's the decision that's on the table right now is for this piece of property. But that's one concern that I have. You know, other facilities around the state are going away from this technology. I discussed with the facility manager, and he said it's a matter of time until their process goes away because of odor issues. Another concern I have about this is the process going forward. I'm looking forward to a conditional use. Well, what kind of conditions would you put on this? In other proposals of various different kinds, we've placed a condition on there: no odors at the property line. And that would be something that I think to be consistent with what we've done.
Dog kennels specifically.
With dog kennels, yeah. And various other things, we put that condition on there. I don't know that the city could comply with the conditions that would be there. Hearing Mr. Myers' testimony tonight on that, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And so I'm not sure if we're putting the city in a position where they could succeed. You know, looking forward, because that has been our history is to put that type of a condition on a permit like this. So I don't know if we're doing them a favor in putting them in a position where if we put a condition that says no odors at the property line and they instantly are out of compliance, that's a problem. Those are my concerns over the proposal.
Thank you. Are you comfortable sharing yours?
I think, you know, I think it's important that we find ways to manage our waste, whether that's green or brown or whatever it is. I'm in favor of, you know, this operation, and I think what the struggle is this the right location? And there's clearly a tremendous amount of concern. My level of concern is definitely not at the level of most of our participants tonight. Up until a couple of years ago, I lived in Young Ward for 25 years, and my house was about 1.25 miles west of the landfill, just directly west. And I never smelled the landfill while I was out there. I could smell my neighbor's dairy farm, you know, when they were ready to spread manure or whatever. So I didn't have any I didn't experience any major impact, so I think that's why maybe it's not as alarming to me as it might be for other folks who are gonna be living, you know, a similar distance or nearby for this property, so, this is a challenging one. I am, having lived here for 30 years, and in a number of capacities, worked with folks at Logan City on projects. I know the quality of work that they do, and I know that they care about what people think, and they listen to their constituents. So I'm not as concerned about this being operated properly, because once they start hearing from the citizens, if it's not being operated properly, it's going to end up like one of these other facilities that we're hearing about. So that's just an overview of what's going through my mind. I have some mixed feelings about this. I don't come from Benson, so I can certainly understand the concern from there. I think they will do a good job. I still have questions about why this particular location, and I'm having a hard time thinking that we couldn't find a better location, but, so yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Well, my concern too is with the property owners that are downwinder from this facility. And I don't know that if they can come up with a different location, I can feel for these people. I wouldn't want to be in a position like that. My suggestion is maybe put it up by the golf course up by the city.
That's off the record.
I was just joking. But I can understand, you know, the citizens of a community and what it might do to the value of their properties, what it will do to the homes that are already there, if there's any problems with it. I don't know if they can give assurances that there won't be any problem with the facility. I think that's probably all your questions, is there going to be an assurance that this will be handled properly and we won't have any repercussions from it. That would be my concern if it was happening close to me. So, and you know, and I know when they put the landfill out in Clarkston, there was a lot of people that were against that coming into the Clarkston area. I know they've had their problems. About the second year, they had an awful lot of water that come into that facility. There was a lot of snow and it rained, and it breached their berm, I guess, where they was trying to contain the water, and it went clear down towards Weston. I know they still have problems with all the litter, the plastic bags, everything that blow out of there. I know they're trying to address that and fix those problems. So hopefully, if this was to happen, they would be able to address those problems in a timely manner and take care of them. But I still have to listen to you folks and what your concerns are. And it's going to be a tough decision to make.
I won't take any more time. I'll just second everything that's been said. The other thing that I would add, and I know that this has already been mentioned, that details doesn't justify our decision tonight. It's either a rezone or a re-not, or either rezone or not rezone. But being forced to make a decision tonight, I am not comfortable with the location. And so, commissioners, at this time, is there someone willing to make a motion? Again, this is only a suggestion to the county council, so they will be the final say. But is there someone willing to make a motion?
Well, I make a motion that we deny this application for a rezone.
For the Cache Valley Compost Facility?
Yes.
That's a recommendation to denial. A recommendation to denial?
Yes.
To the council.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay. So we had 3 yay and 1 nay. Thank you. Okay, as you heard earlier, we really appreciate you here, but we do need to actively work towards 2 more items, so you're welcome to stay, or if you need to go, please take your conversations out in the parking lot so we can hear.
Thank you for listening.
Go ahead, staff, on discussion on, well, do you mind if we just, does anybody need a quick break?
I take a break. We gotta let this clear anyway, or we can't talk.
Chris, if you're ready to go, go ahead.
Okay.
Are we expecting action on these two items, these other two items tonight?
No, but we have to start the discussion for them.
Okay.
Oh, we need to do that in 5 minutes.
You know, the big thing about this
You guys you can move as fast as you want.
isn't going away.
All we gotta do is start the discussion.
Well, and start, one of them we might be able to conclude. One we could probably make a motion on. The cannabis one, you're not gonna act on it tonight. That one's got some more work to be done.
Get some of these people. I mean, at least from my oh, yeah. It was a major deal.
Sorry, we've got to continue. We'll post it online. We just barely got it tonight, so once we have it, we'll post it.
Oh, yeah.
Mother Nature has a tendency of
Yeah, let's discuss this in a different time. We can do some survey.
But we were not.
Your note
I agree.
staff, so your name's already in here.
But water that's supposed to. That's about water. It's after rezone where you have to make the decision, because once you rezone improvement, but then there's still the, I mean, if there was ever happening, there's no. Yeah. But I mean,
Did you have some comments or just moving? Hey, your information was very much appreciated.
You guys have a good day.
Thanks for coming up here and telling us about it. And so we're putting them in a position where they.
As a commission, did you identify conclusions to support the recommendation for denial?
I don't think they can.
Did you want to establish any conclusions to or support that, or do you just want it to go as a motion for denial?
I assume it would be sort of the standard ones where,
Not appropriate for this area? Is that kind of what you're looking for?
context.
It might be helpful to state that the council will ask why you denied the request.
You don't hear them talking about
And
that,
rather
but
than
I
point
agree
them back
that
to the lengthy discussion,
Yeah.
they'll want to know your thoughts. And if you can condense those into some conclusions, that will really help them understand your thoughts presently. Otherwise, they're going to be making interpretations of all of this rather than what you intended to convey.
So do we need to have at least two or maybe three?
It's up to you.
Well, I think it was unanimous, and I really appreciate Chris for standing up for his feelings there. I think from those of us that voted against it, only speaking for myself, but what I heard was I didn't feel, and well, Chris, you even alluded to this too, was we're all in support of it happening. We recognize it has to happen. The compost is a great way. Nobody's opposed to the compost, but the location that we
if I would say that, I think there are plenty of other options.
locations.
Well, no.
Or options.
No, there are plenty of options for other treatments.
Well, you're familiar with this and your travels
Yeah,
throughout
and
the
that,
state.
and that was one of my concerns, is that we didn't hear of alternatives. Snyderville Basin sends theirs to the landfill. South Valley's water reclamation does thermal treatment. You know, those are the types of things that I think would benefit us in our overall discussion.
Why that doesn't work for
is,
this situation.
and it's not some far-flung thing that's back east that they're doing, you know, this there. These are treatment processes that are happening here in the state of Utah that you know, and granted, we're given a proposal for rezone for this, but I would like to hear, you know, did you consider, you got 12 alternatives, but we didn't hear that in your presentation. You said, here are our 3 alternatives, and that's as far as we got. And that's one of the things, you know, if we're putting in there as we're sending this to the council, that would be one of the things. It's lack of information, lack of ability to explain what would happen.
So in other words, there needs to be an illustration showing the pros and cons of different possibilities, cost-wise,
you know, Chris brought that up,
everything.
On the landfill, we had a stack of paper like this, and we had gone through all of the different options, siting locations, and you know, it was a arduous task just to get through the paper to do that. But by the time we were done, it was pretty darn clear that even though the people in Clarkston hated this and all of that, this was what made sense for that piece of property there. I don't think the city made that case. You know, I don't think they gave us enough information. Now to their credit, we're not doing a conditional use permit. Right. But if I'm waiting for, you know, if we wait to do a conditional use permit, the horse is already out of the barn.
That's where I was bound by my final decision, was if our back was against the wall tonight to make a decision. If we went the other option, the gate's already opened and we can't do nothing.
All we can do is conditions at that point.
But the chance of failure at this point, I saw nothing or heard nothing. And it's probably nothing you can guarantee. Yeah. But our fiduciary responsibility to the law, but I mean, yeah. if you invest that kind of money and it fails, then what?
Yeah. And I look at conditions. I mean, we've put conditions on conditional use permits. No odors at the property line. They brought up tonight, hey, we can put a membrane over this that will take care of odors. Well, there's a condition. Put the $1 million membrane over this, and then the odor issue goes away. So,
or at least have it available so that when you need to, it gets covered.
It's much easier to spend the money on the front end, so we put it as a condition. Yeah. Anyway. But one other thing on the discussion, you know, public clamor isn't something we consider a conditional use, but in a rezone, public clamor is something that we can consider. And so one of the things that I think should be on there is this is a gateway to a community, and the community doesn't want this in their gateway. Logan has been really strong in their protection of their gateways to the point of really trying to push certain businesses out of the area. Ted Service being one of those. They didn't like that, and you know, I think this is something.
In other words, they're not concerned about the gateway to Benson.
And that's what I heard from this group of people is this is our gateway.
May I interject for just a moment?
Sure.
I think that this discussion that's happening right now is very valuable, and yet we've
already taken action.
We just gave the public the impression that you were done with this item. And so
yeah, I think what I feel like we're doing is helping Nolan understand why we made the decision we did. If nothing.
Well, that's what Chris. If I'm not misunderstood, you asked for it, didn't you?
I asked for a conclusion. So if you could summarize what you've said, maybe not in a discussion, but into some succinct points.
So I think
I've jotted down a couple. Do you want me to?
The legalities of if we open the gates, we're done. Whereas if we close it now.
Yeah, that you didn't hear as much as you wanted to hear about why other methods of disposing of the waste might not be good alternatives, especially Mr. Wanderson. And sounds like 3 of you didn't hear enough about why other properties might not be a good option. And that at least 3 of you are generally supportive of composting, but would have liked to have heard more about that, and that you recognize they could come back and ask again But if you say yes now, the horse is out of the barn.
Listening to the community, their gateway.
And the gateway to the community.
The other two I have is public clamor and the gateway to the community.
Okay. Is that sufficient?
And ability to control odors in the future. Now, that's something that's more down the road to that, but I didn't hear anything. I mean, their own expert said sometimes it doesn't work.
Chance of failure was extremely high, and I feel that that was from air pollution and water.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst, if the worst spot you could pick for
Well, I think a lot
wetlands impacts.
A lot of these citizens were wanting some assurance that this wouldn't devalue their property or cause them a problem down the road. I don't know that a lot of them are really against it. They just want protection to protect their own.
So just for the benefit of my fellow commissioners before we finalize these conditions or whatever, the reason I voted no against it is just the motion was because I felt like maybe some of these concerns or questions could be answered with some additional information, and maybe there was an opportunity to bring them back or something like that, but I think it was clear that I was the only one feeling that way, so.
Well, I'll be 100% honest with you. I know we're not trying to reinvent our decisions, but a site visit would have been very nice. And I know we had that planned, and I committed to go to it, but it was canceled. So we just plumb did not have enough information to risk opening that gate and have it flounder.
That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
We can, Chris, I'm happy to work with you, and we can prepare a statement of the reasons behind the recommendation.
We can put those together. That's not a problem. At least there's a set of conclusions that the council can refer to. Nolan will be there to refer some of that stuff to them, but it's so helpful for Nolan and for them to have the list of your conclusions.
For sure.
All the rest of the stuff, but if you have that drafted, that's why we typically provide that for you as staff, because it helps that discussion.
Thanks for your consideration.
Yeah, not a
Will
problem.
this go to the council on the next council meeting, or?
They'll set a hearing typically at the next meeting, and then they would hold it at the next.
Yeah, we meet next Tuesday, so we'd have to set it.
The big challenge that you saw
noticing time.
tonight is because of the public clamor, you get drawn into the detail. And so as staff, we want you, and for future and even for the council, to take a step away from all that detail and recognize, do we want this zone to be here? That's the big question. Does this zone belong here? The use is important, but it's not the primary question. Does this zone belong here?
I respectfully disagree a little bit on that, Chris, because once you rezone, any use that's permitted in that zone is now permitted.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So when you have someone who you know that if it's rezoned, here's what they're going to immediately come and ask for. If you're going to make that legislative, political decision, I think it's perfectly appropriate to hear the details of what people would want to use that rezone for, and would they be successful in doing it. I think the details here are important, and to hear it out. The council doesn't have to hear it, even hold a hearing. They usually do. But so this is the place for the public to air it all out. And so I'd err on the side of hearing everything.
So I think you're misunderstanding what I said. If that's okay. I'll continue what I was saying. So the importance for me, and what I'm trying to state is, those things are important. They need to be stated. For you as a commission, you have to remember that level of the rezone above all that other piece. Because like John said, it doesn't just affect this use. They could change their mind, they could go to another property, but now that property's rezoned and someone else can come in and use a different use there.
Exactly.
So the idea is to keep all those things. The public clamor is 100% valuable and should be considered. But as a commission and then as a council, you also have to determine, is this zone appropriate? Because it applies for all
Apart
uses.
from the immediate.
Now and into the future, the code changes. Now the zone will stay the same, but we might add more uses that can fit in that zone. So I'm just making the point to keep in mind, as important as the details are, the zoning has to be considered at this level. That's what they're asking for. They're not asking for a different property, they're not asking for a specific use. In your minds, you have to consider that, because things change and things happen over time, excuse me. So that's my only point, John, is that there's a clarity that we need to achieve with what the rezone's intended to accomplish.
Can I say it a different way? You have to listen to what they're planning to do, because that's the immediate potential request, but there may be 100 other requests of different facilities to go in that zone. And
agreed. Yep.
Hey, did you guys send out, if you did, I missed it, did you send out the additional information to the small scale slaughter facility?
So I've got that stuff here. It's fairly direct. So on the front of that page, you're going to have some summary from what you discussed in your January meeting. Thank you. And on the back, you'll have some amendment for discussion. I don't think John has seen this either.
How many do you have?
I've got more.
Oh.
I've got many copies.
I think everybody's got one now.
Yeah.
So initially what you asked for at that last meeting in January is really a clarity of what are we talking about with slaughter facilities, small scale slaughter facilities, or farm custom slaughtering, and what other examples are out there. So you've had the spreadsheet from before when we looked at the different counties that were similar in size. I reached out to the state. Noel McSpadden is the manager, you can see there, with the Meat and Poultry Inspection Program. He's been a good resource. He recommended I contact Brent Davis in Weber County. He runs the operation there. I gave you some details on. I called Brent and talked with him about his operation. He's been operating for a long time, but his current facility has been in operation for about 3 years. And so he built that to accommodate this specific type of use. So he's licensed with the state. He's the only one on his staff that is licensed with the state. He does kills animals about twice a week, or it is twice a week, 8 to 10 animals twice a week, and he has an inspector on site when that occurs. I believe that's a state requirement, and I can confirm that with Noel McSpadden. He has the 8 FTE, so 6 full-time and 4 part-time employees that assist him. I know that was a question we discussed last time, is how could that occur to allow the employees to assist, and what does it mean to slaughter, skin, and what was the other one? Prepare. And the definition. Let's see. So he estimates, and this was pretty close from what he said, about 900 beefs from last year he slaughtered. 900 beefs, 150 pigs, and 150 lambs. That's most of what he sees, is the beef and then some of the other.
So those numbers that we were batting around are not outside.
They're pretty dang close.
Of what we're
So
talking.
those numbers we were batting around came from Forrest Olson.
And that was just an estimate from.
He was saying, this is as much as I could possibly do.
Right.
And that puts us in the realm of about, I think, 1,500 to 2,000. And as you look on the back, we'll get to that in a second. That's one of the things I recommended as a maximum.
This guy says he does 1,200 though, right? Or
Approximately. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, you guys have only had this one applicant.
Correct.
That just blows my mind.
Well, there's one, but there's another one in process.
They may be waiting for this.
Well, I understand that. I've done some research talking to those in the field. Apparently, there's not a lot of profit margin. It's pretty dang tight, and then it's hard work, no question. But there is such a demand for it. I can't believe they ain't banging the doors down.
I'm shocked. Brent, who I talked to, is 2 years out.
So it's, I mean, I think those two things are true factors, though. The hard work, you know, it's got to take the right person that knows they're going to be working hard.
Not
and
everybody
then,
wants to do slaughter.
Huh?
Yeah, not everybody wants to do slaughter.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but that there is a demand that can't be met right now.
There's an absolute need for it. I have reached out to Weber County. You'll see that I made a note about I asked Brent about some of his land use requirements. He seemed pretty savvy on what needed to be done, but I'm trying to get a hold of Weber County, and I haven't got a response yet back from Weber County, so I'll keep following up with them to confirm that he doesn't require even a conditional use permit. Now, their use chart, from what I found, shows that it does require it, so it makes me wonder if he predates.
Is it a specific zone, or?
It's in a specific zone, AB-3, And it was his intent to be in that zone so he could operate that way. But under Weber County's guidelines, it shows it requires a conditional use permit. So I want to ask them about if he just predated that from a legal standpoint, and so he wasn't required to get a conditional use permit, or what?
So Chris, are you looking for us to take action tonight on this?
You could. I'm not pressuring that. It could wait another month. I know that their timing is they'd like to get started sooner than later as construction would allow. But it's not a necessity for us to act in haste.
We're still talking about the same property.
Yep, same property,
Same proposal.
no, nothing.
They did increase the acreage though to 5, correct?
They'll have to adjust the acreage, and they can adjust the acreage.
Given what you found, do you have no concern that Forest is not gonna be the owner of the property where his slaughter's gonna go on?
I think that's correct.
So,
That's
yeah,
a
I
good
mean,
question
that
about
sort of,
the ownership, right?
like, I'll just raise this again, because I raised it last time, but like, what has changed?
On this,
We said no to that parcel for a reason, because of the context. I mean, we had several reasons why we said no. Changing the ordinance doesn't change that context at all, that I can see.
it changes a couple things. It takes away the rezone requirement, which allows additional uses. It takes away the requirement to make road improvements. It treats it as an agricultural use. That's the biggest change I would identify.
Right, but I'm saying it doesn't change the context of the operation.
The impact.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So why would we say yes when we've already said no to the exact same thing in the exact same location?
That's a good question. The initial request was for a rezone that would allow a larger operation. So for me, they're different. Because that would allow a considerably larger facility with no limits whatsoever in the sense that we're talking here.
Meaning it was a commercial rezone.
It's a commercial rezone for commercial operation.
Yeah.
This kind of steps in
That could be in the-
between what's an agricultural use of a guy just slaughtering his own pig versus a full-scale miller's.
It could be a Miller's. Yeah.
And so for me, that's the distinction. So far as the impact, I think there's an opportunity, speaking of field trips, if you want to go look at what Brent Davis's facility looks like, he's made himself available to have anybody come and look at that if you'd like, and we can set that up.
Do you know the context of his operation? Is he like, near homes and stuff like that?
That's part of my question for Weber County, because they set up some specific requirements tied to that type of operation, and I want to see if those are functioning. So I have a
don't get me wrong, I mean, I want to see this happen in a bad way, but I think if we're going right back to the same thing, I'm just giving a heads up that
Confused
I'm
why.
not seeing a big difference.
My concern has been the homeowners in the location.
Exactly, not that it was going to be commercial versus agriculture.
Yeah.
That doesn't.
It was interesting.
If the homeowners in that area aren't against it.
Some of them are.
They were pretty vocal.
Well,
Everybody that was here was against it.
and that might have changed.
And maybe it has,
This is back.
but I would say that, I think the commission looked at the context of that project, and you can see how close the homes were around there. And it was just hard to see how, that wasn't going to directly affect, I mean, we're talking about, in the previous item, people living 1 to 2 miles away, these folks at the slaughter facility were hundreds of feet away,
So in your backyard, so.
Well, and that's what I'm saying about ownership. Forrest goes there and works and leaves. He's not owning or in there. It's brought somebody else. So when I see the study, I see difference of correlation on that as far as ownership, and because Brent owns his and built it, but Forrest won't own it and won't build it and won't live there or own the property or anything, so.
Is that a preference
I
for the-
think we're going in the right direction. This is
Okay.
great. I'm raising an issue with a
How does it-
project that we've already made a decision on, and I'm just asking, like, what has changed? Because I don't want somebody to come back to us and say, okay, yep, we helped you write this or whatever, okay, so now approve my project, and we're all like, well, it's, we can't do that, or, there's not enough of us to say yes to it, you know, to approve it, so that's what I was trying to raise.
Well, and the interesting thing with this, if they came back to you, we come back as a conditional use permit, so the.
Forest is gone and.
It's almost,
Forest doesn't have enough skin in the game. I mean, he can run in there, but if it doesn't make it, he's gone, and we've still got the zone there, so. To me, I think that's a big deal.
A question.
I have a couple of questions. I've been out of the loop on it, nobody's fault, but this is defining a use. Where would this be, what zones would it be permissible use?
The way it's described, agricultural.
So the zoning, if I recall, I'll pull it up here, is A10 or FR40.
Okay. I have a couple other questions. The first paragraph where it says that it would be done at a place other than a licensed slaughtering house by a person who is not the owner of the animal. Seems like folks that would do small scale would be the same folks who would have their own beef too that they'd want to run through their slaughterhouse.
Not really.
Really?
This, I think that exemption there is, I have a cow, breaks its neck, and I
You took care of your
hang
own.
it up and I slaughter my own cow there. That's the exemption that we're looking at.
You can still do that, this doesn't
Yeah.
restrict that.
But not,
But it's what at the facility.
And we tried to add a section there, but it didn't work. You see the sentence that follows it that's crossed out?
Okay.
what, John, where,
Maybe I'll come talk to
But
you
we
about
probably need
that.
to chat some more. It tends to contradict the previous sentence because this language is intended to create a requirement for slaughtering animals on your own or on other people's animals on your property. So people are coming to you. It's not intended to restrict you from doing your own operation.
And to me, it reads like that if I'm the one that owns this small scale facility, and I've got my own beef, I can't use my own small scale facility to slaughter it.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the case from a standpoint of impact or.
I see where he's come from. Why does that matter?
That's what I would.
Whether
say.
an owner or not of the animal.
That's what I think this says. It doesn't matter.
No, I think the opposite. When I read it,
Well, that's why we drafted this sentence, and then as you read it again, it contradicts the previous. So there was a
let's
problem.
you and me look at that
We
language
need to
together.
discuss that. Yeah.
The other question I have is in subsection 5, 1,500 animal units. Is animal units defined somewhere?
Animal units
Yeah.
is defined everywhere. USDA defines that. Anything at all related to animal units.
Is it,
We
this
can-
is just my ignorance, is it something different than an animal?
Yes.
Okay.
So it varies. So it
Then we
depends.
probably need to point to which of all of these definitions everywhere we're referring to.
And do we need to allow for a conversion? Like,
Animal unit
how many
as-
animal units does a sheep count or a pig count?
That's already established.
Just say
We
animal
wouldn't
units
create
as
our own.
defined by the USDA.
We can say as defined by the
And,
USDA.
this code.
That
would be
works.
good. Subsection 4, setback ought to be 2 words rather than 1, and that's all
I'm in support of getting this done as quickly as possible, but I would just reiterate what Mr. Sands said. I'm not comfortable pushing this to push, I guess, that particular location. Whether they did it at another location or something else, that'd be great, but let's get this done and move ahead.
Yeah, I agree that we can't make a decision based on the location that's been proposed.
Right.
Sounds like we can address the location later, then, you're saying.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
On a case by case.
Yeah, sure.
But are there other comments? Does the 1,500 make sense?
It seems really high to me, but based on this other example, it was my initial reaction just because if they're doing about 1,200 and they've got 8 full-time employees, 8 FTEs, I mean, that's a lot. That's a big operation.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and it wouldn't take a whole lot to up that to 1,500, add another couple full-time employees.
I don't know. I
And
wouldn't pretend to know.
you'd basically be at 1,500.
Didn't he say 50 animals a week? Was that what
He
he said?
estimated 20 to 40.
Animals a week.
Yep. But he was.
Which is gonna be
Scale,
2,000.
So he's probably maximum.
I had pressured him to give me a range.
Yeah.
And so I think he guessed high, based on what I saw from talking to Mr. Davis.
Yeah, that would be my expectation. However, if it's codified, then it,
I mean, this pales to what, I just got called this week because Beaver County is looking at putting in a mid-sized slaughter facility. We're letting one go in, so they wanted to know. And Miller's right now is hoping to be at 325 an hour kill.
Wow. They do like 2,500 to 3,000 a day.
Yep, so, and they're wanting to push it higher. This guy from Beaver's like, well, what are you doing? You know, what are you seeing? And he's like, just like Chris said, 1,500 or whatever, but I'm just saying, yes, we need a limit, but we need to give him scale so that he can be profitable in there, because I'm glad we took out the one person killing, because one person killing, you need more than one there.
Well, that's still what happens. You'll notice when he does his kill, guess who's there?
The only other concern I have, though, is, I guess it's not that big a deal, but at the same time it is. If on paper we say that you can only have one owner, but most of these are partners. I mean, everything I can think of in this valley are partners. From tires, there's one over in Malad, or Weston. I mean, I don't know about Horlockers that goes around. I mean, so if me and my brother, or me and Chris, or whatever else decides to do this, does one of us have to say we're the full-time employee and the other one's the owner? I mean, why can't we restrict it by the number of animals versus the number of owners?
I don't know that we restrict it by number of owners. What do you?
Oh, maybe it was just your example, because I thought we discussed that, though.
We had discussed a lot of things the last time. That
Okay.
may be what you're remembering.
Okay,
That's probably
sorry.
what it is. No, it makes sense.
I'll take care of cannabis in 5 minutes.
So,
what else do you need from us on this?
So
sounds like you
cannabis.
got some wording to do though, right? Some word tweaking?
Yeah, what direction specifics do you have related?
Well, do you want to make some assignments? Do you want one or two of us to go down to Weber, Ogden, and look at this? I'll do it.
If someone would like to do that, we can set that up. Brent seems very amenable to having people take a look at what he's doing. If Brady wants to be on there, does anyone else want to go down there? We can set that up.
I'd go with him, or I'll go.
Okay.
Poll me. If I can make it
Poll
work.
you?
Yes. If I can make it work, I will
We'll
do
just
it.
Yeah, I
send
mean,
out
if
a
you
poll.
do set something up, I'd
Yeah.
love to
We'll
just
send
get
out a poll.
notified. I don't know
Because
how we go.
some of this, I mean, I'm not trying to break down what Mr. Sands already said, but some of this could be misunderstanding too. I mean, so we've got to know those things. Like Mr. Olson comes in and his neighbors, they have no idea what to expect. So it's nothing but, well, I'm going to have guts and whatever else in my backyard. But there's parts of the state that, I mean, if we can get a handle on, just be more comfortable, I think it would be helpful to represent it when they come in, but also know with our ordinance.
Yeah, and to my understanding with the state, there's pretty good follow-up on the inspection side of things, as far as I can tell in my discussion with Mr. Davis and Mr. McSpadden. So that gives me confidence that there's an actual enforcement mechanism in place already.
Well, my understanding is they're so detailed on that, is if he's doing this for income, as to the process of how you kill the animal. You have to be dead center in the middle of that, and if you miss it, then that person who's killing is done.
Yeah, that's probably why he's there. That's why the state inspector is
Because of
present.
the animal rights activists and everything else, they are watching the whole kill process and everything. I mean, it's gone ballistic as to where the requirements go on it.
So let's touch base with Mr. Davis. We'll send out a doodle poll. I'll find out when he's available. He does have some specific times, and then we'll.
But it'd be good to get that done in the next 2 weeks, so we're not backdooring the next meeting.
That's great. We can do that.
I got a couple of comments. Premium Meat over in Brigham is a family-owned operation, and they're down on the west side of Brigham, the north and west, and they kill on site. I used to deal with Erlin's over in Garland, and they come to the farm to kill. But the problem they had was keeping enough help there. They couldn't get help. And that's getting to be the problem with these individual slaughter places. Nobody wants to work in them. So they eventually shut down, Because the son took over and the dad went back to the farm in Pocatello, but then they've reopened, I'm not sure who owns it now. There's a smaller facility over in Brigham that kills, but I don't think they process, because they were taking their meat over to Garland to be processed. And so tires, they don't do on-farm killing anymore. Horticulture still do a little bit of on-farm, the last I checked. So there's all different types of slaughter facilities, how they kill, where they kill. So this gentleman's gotta be more specific in what he's gonna do.
Maybe, I mean, if we could hit maybe a couple, go there and, you know, if there's one in Ogden, we could, or Brigham, we could see a couple of them.
This one's specifically a farm custom slaughtering facility.
They go to the farm.
Well, it's the scale that the state's identified under the state
Oh,
licensing
okay.
requirements. So some of these others might have different, it might be categorized differently.
Yeah, but this one in Brigham, there's no homes or anything around them there. They're pretty much out there by themselves, so. And they do a pretty good job, so. But if you're gonna have one killed, you better get your date now, if you're gonna have it killed a year from now.
2 years from now.
You're up
Just
to
don't
2
work.
years now. So if you buy a calf.
It don't work.
If you buy a calf, get the kill date.
Then it's over finished or under finished or whatever.
I'm gonna connect my computer if you'd like. What we'll probably actually need to do for cannabis is I'll send you a link to a couple web maps. And what these are doing is they're setting up restrictions for properties that could be rezoned to allow cannabis processing, a medical processing facility. So you would be extracting THC from a cannabis plant and then making it medically, well, producing a medically viable THC, can't think of the right word, drug, for medical use. Yeah.
May I clarify one thing? We've talked about this so many times, I've kind of lost track. Originally, I was under the impression that we were trying to limit all of it. But then as you showed pictures and such, this solely clarified or capitalized on, like they'd have to have hoops and they'd have to grow it year round, high production, whatever else, and it's all done right there.
So the ordinance piece looks great. I don't think the council had major issues with that, but they want those two things to come together to them. So they want to see the ordinance come with the proposed properties that could be rezoned. So you've already done all the heavy lifting on the ordinance piece. I don't think there's major issues there. They've already reviewed that, but they want it to come back together with this other piece with the possible properties that could be rezoned.
Question, how do we protect those properties if you, I mean, part of what we're doing is keeping them away from neighbors, subdivisions, schools, whatever. So if we place a zone on those areas, then do we limit anything coming near them, or how do you do that?
We don't. That's a good question. We should probably confirm with John, but typically if they predate the use, it comes
it's
after.
acceptable no matter what moves to them?
They get the right. And some of the stuff that we've identified.
But that's a state statute, so how do you let that ride if they're so close to a subdivision or a school or whatever those requirements are?
That's a good question. That's why I say I'd like to confirm with him, but typically they get the right. They're first in time.
So in other words, you're grandfathering or something like that, right? But I'd like to know the strength of that.
Some of that's accurate in the sense that they can't be legally forced, but that doesn't mean, like, say with a mink farm, that there's something that's considered a noxious use as the neighborhood starts to grow around it, that the neighbors finally force them out.
Because it's going to happen.
Potentially, yeah.
But just to clarify one more time at the same time, we're not regulating just the guy that grows a crop in the summer, or even somebody else that puts up a plant or puts up a processing facility that's not growing it right there. They're just bringing it in. For instance, they grow it in the summer, they dry it, put it in a shed, dry it, and then they process it over the winter months. We're not restricting that.
So that's a CBD operation. This one we're specifically talking about is medical marijuana.
Okay, then we're on the same page. Did you Were you folks here for any of this discussion?
I represent the road department.
You just have to be here as long as we're here.
How about you?
Very interesting, this is very educational.
How about you, ma'am?
So I'll send those web maps out. There's 2 of them. One gives you a breakdown of, you start with so many parcels in the county, and with each new restriction, you restrict the number of parcels that could qualify. And the second one gives you the ability to turn the layers on and off, just so you can see what it looks like if different things are included or not. And it lists them all out so you can see what's been restricted. And what we really need you to look at is, do all those restrictions make sense? And are there any that are missing?
So by doing that, and we're saying.
I suggest you make a motion.
9 o'clock.
Time?
Yeah.
Is there someone willing to give us 10 minutes?
Move that we extend the meeting 10 minutes, a maximum of 10 minutes.
You got 10 minutes, and I'm getting up and leaving, so.
Okay. Philip seconded that. All in favor?
Aye. So if you identify these properties or these places where you zone, and there's only so many licenses, what's the potential of changing the values of those properties versus the people who want to grow? Do you see what I mean? If we're only zoning certain spots in the county, this is where medical cannabis can be grown. Have we changed the value of those properties because the buyers or the growers may not be in that area yet, so now he's got to go solicit to buy in those zones?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it skyrockets.
So,
I just don't understand why we even have to do it, why we can't just do it on a case by case.
That's what I
So
think.
that's a really good question. So some of the challenge we face legally is, if we say, like it's a case-by-case basis, we adopt this ordinance that says you can do it, but we're not going to assign a zone, right? We're not going to rezone a property.
Then we say no.
And then they come to you and you make a recommendation, it goes to the council, and every time they get one, then they say no. You've effectively not adhered to the state requirement.
Okay.
And that will put us in very bad standing legally if someone challenges.
But the standpoint of the property values, I don't know where that's going to come into play, because that's just as bad.
Yeah, we don't really, on the land use side, we don't.
Well, it's naturally going to do it. It's naturally going to do that. It's going to inflate them values because that's the only place they can do it.
Yeah.
Or it's going to restrict their business.
I think you have the limiting factor also of getting a state license, right? There's only a limited amount.
yeah, but if you get one and you're willing to pay 100,000, then you got the bucks to go pay the money for that ground, and so it just went up. Or the farmer who's in that zone's going to say, dude, you paid 100,000 for a license, dole out the rest. So, I mean, market will dictate that, but at the same point, I'm wondering, is that the right process to do that?
And don't they have to be zoned industrial?
Or is this going to be an overlay? Could we discuss doing that?
But if we're taking raw ag land, like that initial map you had,
I think we discussed an overlay zone.
I think
I
the
think-
council
I
decided they
think-
wanted a particular zone.
It needs to be a base zone is what came back from council, not an overlay.
And
That was our
I think-
discussion before.
And I think that was kind of prompted by my legal analysis thoughts that I think that the overlay could still be legally problematic. That I think you need an ag zone that you're allowing to do.
well, that's why I'm asking, because your original proposed map, and I know it was just a start, but that land is currently agricultural. There was some sections up on the very north end of the valley. And so now too, then them people still got to come in and they got to rezone that. So what about our envisioned Cache Valley? Where do we want these areas?
That's, so going through this process, we would have to pursue a rezone of property in agreement with the property owner. If that makes sense. So you're going through the mapping process to identify what areas make sense or what restrictions make sense. And then you're going to send that to the council to see if that makes sense to them. And then we're going to have to pursue as staff, based on that map and the proposal there, some sort of interaction and discussion with the property owners to see who's actually interested in that.
Although I don't think that you have to have property owner buy-in to rezone.
that's probably something we should discuss.
But if you did rezone that, you'd want that property owner to be informed, so if
Yeah,
somebody.
there may be really good reasons, sorry, really good reasons to do it. I don't know legally, I mean, you couldn't move forward with your envisioned cache unless you went around to every property owner affected and said, can we implement our plan?
We have to notice everybody. We can still do a rezone, but I'd like to work out all the details of how that functions to better answer questions that will probably be necessary.
I definitely know that, you know, one of my earlier concerns when we started seeing maps and stuff was the limited number of parcels that, you know, it was like we were trying to zone it out, like Green Valley almost, and it's not that objectionable
You downed it, didn't you?
use. And so,
Oh, it's still going.
I had some questions about the criteria we were
That's the
thinking
big
about.
concern that I have, is I can see problems in the future if we don't follow a really concise process of how we assign this.
Well,
I mean, I think we need to-
For instance, gravel pits are simple, because you gotta have gravel to have a gravel pit.
I keep getting messages.
How much farmland do we have in Cache Valley? And how do you ever start the process outside of if you're within a certain distance of a school or a church? That all makes sense, but how do you pick those parcels? I don't think it's fair that we restrict that, or, I mean, I don't know what the state's doing, but it makes zero sense to me as a property owner.
I think it changes the cultural of.
Because land is land, if it grows, it grows.
What's the property rights is what I'm looking at from a property rights standpoint.
Huh?
Sorry, just so an option would be maybe to put it as a permitted use and just the existing then that would be.
Right, then it's anywhere, or.
It just would be kind of helpful, and I know you guys have done as best you can with COVID and everything else, but on stuff like this, if we can get it and get it done, because it drives me crazy trying to remember what we've already talked about and what we've.
And it did go to council, then it got sent back.
Okay.
So we don't control some of those, we don't control most of those actions. But that's where it's at now. We can give you more detail next time.
And I can see where the council's coming from. They want to see what's the potential impact of
emails like.
of making this code change.
I think, you know, what I'll be looking for is just, you know, smart criteria that help us decide where these are allowed, right? And we already know there's gonna be an extremely limited number of these things permitted. Like, you can count on one hand, right? And so.
In the whole state.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about Cache County though,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Just in Cache County, right, where we have some jurisdictions, like, you know, I think we don't have to be so limited in where we say.
Come on, let's shut this down.
It would be nice to see plenty of options. You know?
Run that down.
Yeah, and that's the intent with these maps, is we can turn those layers on and off and see what's there.
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. You got anybody else?